HOA story time with an update, the rental property from heck. During my tenure, I have seen all sorts of weird appeals and issues that we had to resolve, from pond management problems to neighborly disputes. The issue is, this story, however, centers around a specific renter in our neighborhood along with their terrible management company. The main story. At the end of every quarterly meeting that we have for the community, members have a chance to stay back and review issues with the board case by case. Typically, this consists of community members who have fines that want to appeal or settle. This time, however, a regular attendee came in, which, well, surprised all of us. She had never once had a fine, helped with some committees, and had two amazing kids, one of which was special needs. This is important later. She sat down and calmly sat down a folder in front of us, and that's when I knew she was serious. Then she began to explain how she needed help from the board with an issue with her neighbor. She described in painful detail about how her neighbor had been digging up and taking her flowers and had kept flipping around the basketball hoop that her special needs son used regularly. She had even installed a camera and had video evidence proof, which she showed to us. Immediately, I became concerned and told her to call the police immediately. She looked down and informed us that she had, and the police told her to go through the HOA first. While that still made no sense to me, I said that we could look into how we could help. She thanked us with teary eyes and left after that. I walked out of the meeting, scratching my head on how I could help without even really knowing what I could do. When I got home, I looked up the address of the neighbor that was bothering her to discover that the house belonged to a renter and the property owner had a long history of issues with the HOA. While I am not really allowed to discuss specifics here, let's just say that the property has had 10 tenants in 7 years and still has some serious outstanding issues with the board. I looked up the property company and I discovered that they owned over 50 houses across multiple towns in my area and had a D- rating with the Better Business Bureau. I contacted my other board members and asked their opinion on the situation while providing them with the findings of my research. One of them reminded me that the management company had sent a representative to the meeting prior and tried to appeal a whole host of fines with the excuse that they simply did not want to pay them. I had honestly forgotten that that was the same house. Not to mention, they also tried to claim that since their tenants did not want to pay, neither should the property company. So we denied all of their requests since they were years behind in many fees and dues. I drove by the property and realized how bad it looked. The grass was over a foot high, there were dog chains in the front, and their flowers were of course immaculate, and the neighbors' houses were missing. I saw the basketball hoop flipped around for myself, and I could not help but let my jaw drop. I could not imagine how that lady felt for the atrocities that she had to deal with having neighbors like that. I took some pictures and drove back. The revenge. I contacted the board's legal consult and asked if there was anything that we could do to help. Since the property ownership company had refused to pay dues and fines for over 8 years since buying the house, we did have the authority to foreclose and then put the house for sale through the bank that had the loan, which I thought was a little strange that corporate housing company would mortgage it given the amount of houses that they owned, but oh well. I did not like the idea of foreclosing just yet, so I set up a meeting request with the tenant. I sent a request for him to talk to the landowner since we were not allowed to interact with renters, and made my list of items. When the next meeting rolled around, the same representative from the company that showed up a few meetings ago was there. He stayed around, and when it was time for his individual time slot, he sat down and calmly asked what was wrong. My VP started with the list of fines and past due payments and asked if and when they planned to pay it. He replied calmly that they had no intention of paying them. I then asked him if he knew that that means the company could lose the house to foreclosure. He looked sheepish for a second and then replied that they had great lawyers since they had dealt with this through other neighborhoods. We tried to reason with them a bit more, but it was clear that they thought they were above the community standards and owed us nothing. So I personally like to wait 10 years before finally deciding to foreclose on a delinquent house, since no account has ever had that long of a history with the HOA, as we're usually able to resolve the issue. HOAs need to use that authority extremely carefully. Since this was clearly never going to be resolved, the board voted to start the proceedings to foreclose on the property. I reached out to the other HOAs where the company held property and found out that 2 of them were doing the same thing. While it's currently an ongoing case, there is a chance that we can also file a class action lawsuit against the company for property negligence. We'll see what happens, but I would love to run them out of business, since all they do is get bad renters, ruin houses, and ignore HOA rules. I also got into contact with our community's police contact and informed him of the flowers stealing and trespassing. He was stunned to hear that the department had turned this lady away and offered to help. She reached out to me a few days ago to let me know that there is now an investigation into the matter and that she's trying to sue him for stealing property. I offered to testify if it ever came to that, and I am sure that she will win. The update. 9 months ago, I posted about a rental property that was out of control due to a poor investment property firm. After a long legal battle, the board was able to prove to a property judge that the land was out of control and was not maintained. We secured a lien of 20% of the home for all of the fines and unpaid violations, and the judge ordered them to be paid immediately. Otherwise, they would face an expedited foreclosure since the property owner was acting in bad faith, and my state has a special process for these edge cases. As of yesterday, the company who owned the property declared themselves insolvent since 3 other surrounding HOAs imposing similar fines on their properties were included in the ruling. We cannot wait to recoup the damages, and we are working our local foreclosure management team to try and help guide the process in selecting a new homeowner, since any party with a 15% stake gets weird voting rights. We're really hoping for a tenant that wants to take care of them and want to avoid another investment company with a poor record of house maintenance. As for the poor homeowner whose flowers were stolen, the board paid for the neighborhood's landscaper to professionally install them after the current renter left a few months ago. The homeowner's property looks awesome, and they've recently joined our social committee to welcome new people into the neighborhood. While I have to keep it very vague, there are also criminal charges being investigated, which will unfortunately take more time to process. While not every story has a happy ending, the diligent work of this homeowner saved the community and others from a terrible homeowner. Always document these issues, since you never know how someone else may be able to help you with it. Do you think this HOA Karen got justice, or what would have you done in this situation? You ever had a bad neighbor? Let me know. Nightmare HOA stories. Whiskey Isn't Enough says, oh boy, do I have a good one. Obligatory not me, but my best friend. My best friend, S, grew up in suburban Arizona. His family owned their home and rarely had problems with their HOA other than it being generally fascist. It all started with some cardboard boxes. S and his sister, at the ripe age of around 6 or 7, wanted to make a fort in their front yard, and their dad, being the great guy that he was, helped them build a crappy cardboard box fort for them to play in. Being kids, they played in the fort for a couple of hours and proceeded to get distracted playing elsewhere. Not a day later, they received posted notices on the door and phone calls informing them that they need to clean the unsightly garbage out of their yard or be faced with fines. It wasn't a huge deal, but they left the family a bit jaded towards the HOA. Fast forward a handful of years later, S's dad decides that he wants to paint the house. Now, if you don't know, most HOAs have strict rules on the color and sand templates for you to pick off of. He said that the templates ranged from tan to slightly different tan. S's dad finds a color that he likes that's more of a greenish tan and sends it, paints the whole house. The HOA proceeds to have a meltdown because they painted their house outside of the allowed color spectrum. S's dad said, no frickin' way, it's basically the same color, I'm not repainting my entire house. So the HOA hires a contractor to come down with a paint color tester and post notices on their door with a detailed analysis of how his color is yucatan and it doesn't fit the spectrum, and if they don't repaint it by the end of the month, they will be fined. Instead of folding, S's mom finds out when the next meeting is and discovers that no one votes. The same dude has been president of the HOA for way too long, and there is some shady crap going on in terms of contracting. So she walks around the neighborhood the next few weeks campaigning and runs. She wins by a landslide. It was the largest turnout for an HOA meeting since its inception. Apparently, everyone was also sick and tired of the bullcrap, but they just bent over. So, S's mom is elected president and discovers that the previous regime was doing the old hook up my son-in-law by contracting his company and pay him stupid amounts of money to water the sandwash bullcrap. She quickly ends all that crap. Rather than change any rules other than a few stupid ones, the S family office just decided to refuse to enforce any of them. S's mom goes years as president. Recently, she decided screw it and didn't show up to the election, and someone else got elected. Now the new guy is trying to enforce the old rules, but everyone is so used to the freedom there's a frickin' war going on. I Run Farther says, my old HOA was going through that around the time that I moved in. I was a new homeowner and rather young. My neighbors were all 50 plus, and my wife and I were in our mid-20s. I loved my neighborhood because it was so quiet. So I decided to take an interest in my local community, so I went to the HOA meeting. 3 guys showed up about 45 minutes late. I waited around since the firefighters at the station that we used said they were always late. They said, great, if we can get 3 more people here, we can vote to end the HOA. It caught me off guard. I guess from the very beginning, the HOA had been trying to dissolve itself, but didn't have enough members to show up to take an actual vote. By the time I sold my house 8 years later, they still existed, but hadn't had a dues payment in 6 years from any of the households on the street, to include the HOA board members. Rax Dominus says, other way around, my mom was the president of the HOA for her backwoods little neighborhood. Maybe 30 people lived there. Everyone used one well. The well had a problem once, so no one had water. It was $800 for a temporary fix or $2,000 for a permanent fix. My mom had a meeting where out of the 30 people, 5 showed up. No big deal, those 5 people funded the $800 to get it fixed since they've been without water for almost a week. No one would split the cost, and the dues were so low that it didn't cover them, so those 5 people paid for everyone's well. Well, in preparation for the actual fix, she tried to raise money, but only got halfway there when it broke. My mom went door to door asking for everyone's share before they'd fix it. It was like $50. It was another week without water. No one would pay for the well that they all used. Finally, around half of the neighborhood raised the money to fix it. Later, they all had a giant barbecue at my parents' house, but the people who didn't pay weren't invited. 11 Ghost says, like 2 days before I bought a condo, I was told that I would be blocked from moving in unless I paid the first month of HOA dues. So the morning of the closing, I went to the management company's office and dropped off a check. I moved in without issue and then continued to pay my dues on time each month. Like 4 years later, I got an invoice for $800+. Apparently, they never cashed that first check. So when I paid the next month, they credited it toward my first month and assessed a late fee. This continued for 4 years, where every month's check was credited to the previous month. I got in a huge argument with the accounting office, and they wouldn't budge on the $800+ in late fees. I was irate. Richard fell off, posted, "It didn't happen to me, but the city I grew up in was briefly in national news because the HOA was trying to force an elderly couple to give up their only grandchild for adoption after her parents were killed in a traffic accident. The little girl had no other living family and had watched her parents die. But the HOA wanted her gone because it was a retirement community and told them to give her up or be homeless. You won't stop smoking on your porch at night? Guess we'll burn our house down. Posted by ULFR. Hi all, just found out why there were a bunch of flashing lights and loud sirens on the street behind mine last night, and I am gobsmacked. The family that used to live in the house behind mine, whoever, so helpfully called the police on me after I gave them a heads up about their Wi-Fi, has moved out. A new family has moved in. Our houses are separated by a couple hundred feet and a brush line. I found this out because they came to talk to me last week about my smoking the funny before I go to bed on my porch and how the smell is terrible and it's bothering them and I just need to not do that. As a note, I smoke precisely 1/2 gram of the funny on my screened-in porch before bed, perhaps 3 to 4 times a week. The likelihood that any of the smoke from that is going anywhere near their house is slim to none. I told the new back neighbors I'll turn a ceiling fan on to thin out the smell, but I'm not going to get eaten alive by bugs just before bed because they don't want me to smoke on my own property and the porch is screened in. I guess this answer didn't satisfy them because last night one of them came up with a cunning plan to get back at me. They dug a hole in their lawn, built a fire with a bunch of green pine wood so it would be extra smoky, started the fire, and then put a box fan pointed at my porch next to the fire and went inside. 3 guesses what happened. If you guessed that they set their own house on fire, you would be correct. One of their next door neighbors called 911 because some cinders from the fire set my back neighbor's house on fire. I have no idea how much the fire damaged the house, only that the people who lived there got arrested and given an impressive set of fines for negligence and a bunch of other things. Did I mention that my county is under a fire weather warning and all of those fines are multiplied? The juiciest part, and the reason I decided to post on here about it was, one of the cops was talking to the neighbors who were going on and on about the awful, funny smell that I was causing and making the house uninhabitable. The cop sniffs a little bit and tells them that's not that, that's a skunk. Karen story time, entitled Woman Wants Man with Cancer's Chair, posted by Raised Anchor 68. This was over 20 years ago. I was invited to a coworker's wedding and it was small budget and big energy. The ceremony was to be in a garden and there was going to be more people than seats. The invitation politely asked that the seating be for immediate family and those who might need it more than others. I arrived and met my other coworkers. We were all young and fit then, so standing was no issue for us. We were there early and we got a spot near the front and close to the chairs. The chairs were in 2 sections with a path in the middle, and the front row of each section was reserved for the bride and groom's family. The rest of the chairs were up for grabs. A couple arrived, both late 20s, and took the seats at the end of the row behind the bride's family row, just near us. The man of the couple did not look well, and his hair was missing. A few people made their way over to say hello to him. He smiled as he talked, and he looked happy to be there. The chairs filled up fast with the older attendees, and people that arrived after that took standing places at the sides like us. I checked my watch, and start time was not far away. A few minutes later, I saw a young woman walk in. She was in her early 20s, and she walked along close to the chairs, looking around as if she was searching for someone. She got all the way up to near us and then tapped the unwell man on the shoulder. I thought she might have known him until I heard her say, "Excuse me, can I have that seat?" He looked at her as if he didn't understand, so she helped him by repeating, "Can I have that seat?" "Why?" he asked, and I thought the same question. "Because you're a man and I am a woman. You should be a gentleman and offer me that seat." Every conversation nearby suddenly stopped. People turned and looked. The bride's family in the front row must have known this man, and they all turned around. A few of them stood up and looked as if they were about to interject when the man's partner leaned in front of him and said loudly, "He has cancer and he needs to sit down, okay?" The young woman looked around and realized that she had a lot of attention. How was I supposed to know? She protested and then walked quickly away and disappeared in the crowd behind the chairs. The wedding went well after that. I spoke to my coworker when he returned from his honeymoon, and the man was his wife's cousin. The young woman was his wife's coworker, but they were not close. I did learn over the years that followed that the man ended up beating the cancer and became a father. I do not know what happened to the young woman because I never asked. You gotta love a wholesome Karen story with a good ending like that, but I can't help but wonder what happened to her. What do you think? I used to exclusively sell cell phones inside of a middle-class retail chain. This service was actually run by a different company than the retail chain itself. We would provide all the nicer cell phones like iPhones and Samsung Galaxies, $800 to $1,500, and the retail chain provided the cheaper prepaid cell phones. My team and I would sell all of the phones, but only we could sell the nicer phones. At the time of this incident, I was the team lead for my store, meaning that when it came to the nicer phones, I was the final word. We never discounted the phones directly, but various service providers would authorize rebates and incentives, and that was it. When you bought a nicer phone from us, we would directly pull up your service provider account and set up the phone directly, and they would provide any discounts or credits or rewards. We were also able to report fraud through this system. The story. It was a slow day at the cell phone station, so I decided to do a cold sell lap of the store, leaving a newer team member, let's call her Tina, in charge of the cell phone area for the 20 to 30 minutes that it would take to find someone to buy a phone. I was gone maybe 10 minutes before I get a call from the store manager asking me to get back to the cell phone station because there was an issue. When I get back, I see Tina is about to cry while an overweight Karen is holding a small piece of paper and yelling at her. As I get closer, I hear the word coupon and I immediately know what's about to go down. Less than a week ago, Tina had accepted several fake coupons, which was my day off and her partner called out without telling me, and severely discounted the nicer phones on the fake coupons. She was new, and we hadn't covered that you can never discount the phones yourself, nor that we had never had coupons for these either. Afterwards, I made it clear to her that our team will never discount the phones. Cut back to the present. I see the store manager watching from around the corner. I waved him off and strode forward. Facing Tina, I asked what's going on. Tina let me know that the Karen wanted the newest iPhone and was trying to use a 99% off coupon. Before she could continue, the Karen cut in. I don't know what the issue is. She accepted these coupons last week from my friends. Karen then pushed the coupon towards Tina, like that would magically change the situation. I told Tina to take an extra 15 in the back and then turned back to the Karen. I was ticked, and I think it was showing just a bit because Karen flinched. While I hadn't been in too much trouble over the coupon issue the week prior, I had been passed over for a promotion to another store because of it, and I was not in the mood. Not only was she basically trying to steal a phone, she had specifically targeted Tina. Who told you Tina would accept this ridiculously fake coupon? Was it Kathy? We had records for the nicer phones, and Kathy's account was banned from every one of our locations because of the prior incident. Karen became pale at that last question, and I think she realized that she was in trouble. She tried to mention something about the retail chain accepting these types of coupons, and I laughed. I explained that the retail chain didn't have any say over the nicer phones, and that we worked for a different company. She tried to insist that we had already taken these coupons before, so why couldn't she use them now? At this point, I was done, and then I told her, in no uncertain terms, that we will never discount the nicer phones and that she would not be purchasing phones from this location, period. Fortunately for me, the store manager had hung around, and I called him over. "Can you call asset protection?" I picked up the coupon and handed it to him. Using a fake coupon is stealing, and this woman also knows Kathy from last week. Karen tried to run, but we were lucky in that the police were already at the entrance for an entirely separate issue. I heard later that Karen did get past them initially, but the police were informed of the situation and were able to detain Karen before she made it to her car, and then arrested Karen. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened after that, but I did give a statement about this incident 2 weeks later to the police, so I think charges were filed. I literally laughed when I read 99% off because who even tries to think that's believable? What do you think? This HOA Karen is absolutely mental. It's called I Had a Rare Encounter with a Wild Karen and Her Weed Whacker. Get ready for this one, man. To set the stage for this interaction with a Karen, we have a friend who we'll call M. Now, M can speak English and hear just fine, but is fluent in American Sign Language and prefers to use that when interacting with new people in public, rather than talking to them, and I translate for them as needed. So M and I were doing a Scouts event called Scouting for Food. We were taken to a specific neighborhood to tie blue bags on the residents' doorknobs. The bags were for them to fill with a non-perishable food like canned soup or cereal and other things that don't spoil easily, and we definitely don't have people pay for them. If you want to put out a bag, you put out a bag. If you don't, you don't. No big deal either way. So M was walking on one side of the street and I was on the other. As we round the corner, I see some movement from out front of one of the houses. A woman with a surprisingly normal haircut was standing in her front yard, prowling like some kind of horror movie killer. My first red flag went up when she spies us walking down the street, going up to each house and tying a bag on the doorknob, and she retreated back into her garage. The second red flag was when she walked back out of said garage holding a weed whacker like a pitchfork. M was on the side of the street that her house was on and hadn't been paying too much attention to what was going on around us. As I begin to walk up to the next driveway, I hear a voice call out loud and brash, like someone trying to play a saxophone for the first time. "Excuse me, young person." I turn around and sure enough, it's Karen. She's standing on the edge of her yard, eyes locked onto me. M is standing a few feet off of her property, not quite daring to walk in front of the house with the crazy weed whacker lady. Realizing that she has my attention, the Karen gets bolder. "You are not allowed to solicit in this neighborhood. No salespeople allowed." To explain why Karen was saying that we're door-to-door salespeople is so ridiculous. Both me and M were wearing our uniforms, which consist of red polos, sashes, and jeans. Okay, the jeans aren't uniform, but this took place in the fall, and jeans are comfy. Karen takes a step towards M and waggles the weed whacker. Not wanting M to get hurt, I tried to defuse the situation by saying the obvious. "We're not selling anything. This is legal. We're not bothering you. Leave us alone." I turn back around and continue up the driveway. "No," Karen shouts. "Nuh-uh. This neighborhood doesn't allow solicitors. You're breaking the law." We were definitely not breaking the law. The food bank we were helping with had worked this neighborhood every year for 6 years now. They got the required permits for specialized neighborhoods and sent formal disclosure papers to neighborhoods with committees to keep people from being able to intervene like Karen is doing right now. It's not soliciting because we're not selling anything. I call over my shoulder. Emma snapped out of her daze and is now crossing over the street to stand on the driveway that I'm standing on, where she rapidly signs, "The lady is crazy. Lucky we don't call the cops." Which, of course, just adds fuel to the fire. Karen starts yelling about how we can get arrested for using gang signs in public. Honestly, I tune this part out because there's only so much BS that I can take in a day. I see the door in front of me open up and a guy pokes his head out and gives me a "You okay, fam?" look. At this point, I gesture to Karen and he rolls his eyes. Behind me, I hear Karen ranting. "I'll call the homeowners association and get you thrown out. I'm a part of the neighborhood watch, so the police would believe me if I told them a couple of teenage vandals were threatening the peace and tranquility of our home." The guy in front of me steps out of his house and gives me a tense smile, the kind you give someone when you're trying not to tell someone else off. "You gotta love people," he says quietly to me and him. "Oh yeah, people are my favorite," I say, rolling my eyes as she revs the weed whacker again. "Hey Karen, leave him alone. The last time you did something like this, you were almost thrown off the watch. This guy's my freaking hero." So Karen yells something about toxic masculinity while letting the weed whacker go full blast before retreating to her backyard and turning on a lawnmower. M flashes the man a quick thank you in sign language, and I hand him a bag, thank him for the help, and we move along. If you've ever used a weed eater, you know how much it hurts whenever a rock comes up and flicks your leg if you don't have long pants on. Imagine the string just going around and around and chopping you with Karen. That's like nightmare fuel horror movie stuff. How would have you handled her? Jeez. Oh, and a lawnmower too? Hope it's a zero turn. I love my zero turn. You ever tried one? They're awesome. Shady HOA dealings exposed in non-existent HOA by the Raccoon 2. And it has an update. So I bought my house 4.5 years ago from the company that built it. The house I bought was new construction in a neighborhood that had existed for about 8 years. Even now, there are still a few empty lots in the neighborhood. Last year, I received a document in my mailbox, which confused me, as it was a handful of pages stapled together. The title on the first page was, "Restrictive Covenants for Our Neighborhood." After reading through the documents, I was confused, as it was supposedly the covenants for the homeowners association that governed our neighborhood. I immediately contacted the builder of my home asking about an HOA. He had his realtor call me, and she assured me that there was no HOA. And looking at the online website for our county, there is no organization registered with the name of our neighborhood, which would be required of an HOA. So I also talked to one of my neighbors, whose house had also been built by the same builder, and asked if he had found a copy in his mailbox. He had, and I explained that I'd talked to the builder and his realtor and that there was no HOA. He was relieved, as his wife was really angry about thinking that they'd been duped into buying a house in an HOA neighborhood. While we were standing in his front yard talking, another neighbor walked up, and he also said that he'd received a copy, and he knew the person who was distributing them. She was really upset that commercial vehicles were being allowed to park overnight in our neighborhood. There are a couple of work trucks that park in the driveways of a few of our neighbors at night. One of the key things to note is that the document was not mailed to me. Somebody made the copies and then put a copy in my mailbox. No envelope and no postage. I live in the USA, and accessing someone else's mailbox is a crime. So I took the document to a copy store, and I had them make me a couple of copies without removing the original staple from the corner. I then took the original to the local USPS post office. I showed them the document, and they explained how it came into my possession. The clerk behind the counter said I would need to talk to the postmaster, and when he came to the counter, I showed him the document, and I explained about it appearing in my mailbox. He was scowling by the time I finished, and I pointed out the last page, which was a letter complaining about all the people that were violating the number 8 of the covenants, which was a prohibition of parking commercial vehicles on the roads or driveways in the neighborhood, stating that all commercial vehicles must be parked in a closed garage. So the letter also asked for our support in electing the person who had distributed the copies to the HOA board. It contained the name, the address, and the phone number of the person. The postmaster saw that last page, broke out into a really evil grin, and asked if he could have the document. I told him that the document he was looking at was the original that I'd found in my mailbox, and that I had copies for my own files without removing the staple. I also told him that I'd spoken to several of my neighbors, and they had also received copies in their mailboxes. The postmaster thanked me and said that he would be calling the person and explaining to them how many federal laws they'd violated by accessing someone else's mailbox. So my neighbors and I, we are still HOA free. An update. Now another thing to consider is that an HOA is a business and legally has to file certain reports every year to document fees collected and expenses paid, and have a certain number of meetings every year with notifications publicly posted of the meeting dates, the times, and the locations. And hold elections for members of the board, which also requires notifications to be publicly posted. At least that's true in Tennessee where I live. There are stone walls with signs at the entry to the neighborhood. As an example, if the sign says Charles Place, the road I lived on would have been named Charles Road, and the crazy neighbor would then think that there's a Charles Place HOA. The Tennessee Secretary of State's office has a business information search page on their website, and when I search for the first word in the name of our community, it comes up with 3 entries, all of which are a construction company with slightly different names like Charles Construction Incorporated, LLC, and then Incorporated with capital letters, with different ending dates. The 2 that are inactive show the same city as where I live, but the active entry is in a different city about 300 miles away. There are 2 words on the signs at the entrance to the community, and if I search for both words, there are no records found. Also, in the 4.5 years that I've lived here, I've never been asked to pay any HOA dues or fees, nor have I ever received notification of an HOA meeting or HOA election. Based on what was in the letter, my neighbors started this whole mess in order to ban all commercial vehicles from parking on the street or in driveways. In order to start an HOA, a vote has to be taken of all the property owners within the proposed boundaries of the HOA, with a simple majority required. But one of the nice things is that regardless of how the vote goes, an existing property owner can still choose to not join the new HOA and would not be subject to fees or fines or any new rules created by the new HOA. But once the non-member sells their property, then the new buyer would be required to join the HOA. Terrible HOA Karen in neighbor, who is also on the HOA board, is nitpicking on us and threatens to call the police. What do we do? Posted by QS Muta. I recently bought a condo, a 2nd floor unit, and have been trying to settle in with my family, 2 kids, 12-year-old and 3-year-old. My problem is our 65-plus old neighbor who's also on the board of the HOA. She lives alone with her dog right next door to us. She's been kind of bullying us from day one. Every time she passes by us, she gives this disapproving and demeaning look, which I never understood why. Our downstairs neighbor who came in and introduced themselves told us that she is like that to everyone and warned us to stay away from her. She has been telling us to do a lot of things, like park our car much too far away from the parking line, even though we parked ours much well inside the lines, because she wants more space to open her car doors. We agreed because we wanted to be nice. She keeps telling our kid not to play in the front of the building. This is a gated community and all kids play out in front in the evenings. We agreed. She then said that he should not play behind the building also, which is mostly woods and trees. We agreed to that too. But our 12-year-old, being 12 years old, went some 30 feet into the tree area and sat underneath the trees with his 2 friends and was playing with sticks. This woman comes knocking on our door and yells at me. I said, okay, I will tell my child to not play there. But I got real ticked off when she said, when does school start? Very soon, I suppose. Can't wait for them to go back. In front of my kid. He felt very hurt, and I convinced him, saying that sometimes people can be mean and we should not be bothered by it. Last week, at around 11:30 at night, my husband was sitting in our balcony spray painting a picture frame. She came downstairs to walk her dog, looked up, saw us, and asked what we were doing. My husband said, spray painting. She gave some weird BS reasons as to why we're not allowed to spray paint or switch on our balcony light after 10 p.m. and that there are rules. She also had the management email us the rule book. We read through it and there was nothing relating to balcony lights or spray painting or anything remotely related to it. Yesterday, I was spray painting a footboard in the evening and I finished doing it at around 10:30 at night. She saw me cleaning up and then asked, "Are you painting again?" I said, "Yeah." She replied, "I've told you already not to do that. It's 10:30. I politely and very calmly said, "Hey, I'm only spray painting and it is not disturbing anyone." To which she angrily replied, "There are rules and I'm complaining about you to the police tomorrow," and walked away. I brought in the headboard 30 minutes later after they dried. She does not live directly above or below us, and there's no way she would even know that I was painting if she hadn't looked up into my balcony. There was absolutely no noise except from the very small spraying noise from the rattle can, which I am 200% sure is not audible 10 feet away from where I was painting. We did not make a peep when moving the headboard also. We feel like we're being bossed around by this woman. A few others feel this way too, but they've not openly said it to us, but have implied it. She has lived in this building for over 25 years, and we are only 2 months in. We are Asians and immigrants. Any police complaints against us could affect our visa status. At the same time, I don't want to be walking over eggshells in my own home. I would like to live with self-respect. We just bought this place and moving is not an option. What do I do? This commenter lays down the truth. It's time for you to read, know, and understand every rule in the HOA like the back of your hand. This way, she has no power over you. She assumes that you will comply because she thinks that she knows more. Use the rules to your advantage and don't give her the satisfaction of you breaking even the most minor of rules. This story of a terrible HOA is called Can't Build a Bridge Across the Supply Ditch, Move Your Supply Ditch, posted by Snow Inferno. The backstory. My grandfather owned some 14 acres of land. There was a state-owned water supply ditch running between the top half and the bottom half of this acreage. To use official roads to get from the top half to the bottom half required a 5-mile detour that Gramps had had enough with. The history. A neighbor had been granted the appropriate permits and everything required to build a bridge across the supply ditch a half a mile or so up the ditch. A neighbor of his was disgruntled with the bridge, hooked up some chains to his tractor, and pulled that sucker down right into the supply ditch. The state or county banned building bridges across the supply ditch because of this jerk and the debris that was dropped into the supply ditch. The compliance. He'd had enough driving 10 minutes around to get to the other plot of land and decided that he wanted to build this bridge. Upon learning of the prohibition of bridges across the ditch, he took it upon himself to resurvey his land and the rights granted to the state for the supply ditch to bisect his property. It turned out the state built this ditch just 20 feet away from the actual right-of-way that was granted to them for the ditch. He got into a lengthy fight over it with the water board, and it finally came down to an ultimatum. Let me build my bridge or move your supply ditch to the proper location. Ultimately, he won this battle and that summer began construction of the abutments and purchased a railroad car which was cut in half and the halves placed side by side across the abutments and the supply ditch. I still remember going out to his farm that summer and sandblasting those railroad cars and then painting it with a special paint to prolong the life of the bridge. The epilogue. Years after the bridge was built, the land above the ditch was subdivided and placed in an HOA, the bridge being the property of said HOA. Parcels of the subdivided land were sold off and people moved in and built homes in this HOA. These fools couldn't be arsed to meet once a year, have an official minutes of this meeting, and pay a minimal amount to keep the HOA running and the bridge under their control. Dad and I went out there to try and fix it up after they let this crap lapse and got everything reinstated. Everything is hunky-dory again, and these morons are warned that we're not traveling halfway across the country again to fix their screw-up. What did they do? They let that crap lapse again. The HOA is dissolved, and as far as we know, the bridge now belongs to the county, who can open it up for public use so everybody above the ditch can make use of it instead of driving 5 miles around to get to the main highway. Roommate stole from me, so her wallet vanished, posted by Charming University 98. Back in college, I had better credit than my 3 other roommates, so I put our internet and TV under my name, otherwise the deposit would have been $600. The cable company offered me a $300 Visa gift card upon sign-up. 2 months later, I called them because the gift card never arrived. They tell me they sent it a few weeks ago, and eventually I'm able to find out from Visa that someone used it at the Whataburger, Target, and liquor store near my house. I'm ticked off because obviously one of my roommates has used it, but I don't know which one. A few weeks later, roommate number 2 complains that their $200 birthday gift card to Target has gone missing. His mom still had the receipt, and the store was able to tell her that someone used it at the Target near our house. He's obviously ticked off too, but we've now realized it's probably one of the other 2 roommates. A couple of weeks after that, roommate number 3's wallet disappears. We turned the house upside down looking for it, and we knew it had to be in the house because her car key is attached to her wallet and her car is parked at the house. She is absolutely frantic, sobbing, screaming, hyperventilating, and so on, throwing crap everywhere and just having an absolute meltdown while tearing the house apart. We had never seen her behave like this, so we're all kind of surprised that she'd be that upset about her wallet. It's stressful, sure, but I genuinely was concerned about how she was reacting. She says the gift card thief must have taken it, implying that it's roommate number 4, the only person who hasn't had something stolen yet. A few days after that, I found her wallet in the trunk of my car. We had gone to get groceries together, and I guess she just laid it in the trunk while we were unloading. I'm like, holy crap, I found her wallet. And then I open it up because I'm just excited to confirm that I did indeed find her wallet. Bam! Both stolen gift cards, front and center. No doubt. The Visa gift card has my name printed on it, and roommate number 2's mom had written something in Sharpie on his gift card. I realize she had a meltdown because she was afraid we would find out that she was the thief. I left the wallet, cash and all, right where it was, pushed up against the inner lip of the trunk so you couldn't see it unless you leaned farther into the car. The locksmith wouldn't make her new keys without the title, and the title was in the glove box of her locked car. All in all, she spent about $500 replacing her driver's license, title, and keys, not to mention not being able to drive her car for 2 weeks. I moved out of state with her wallet still in my car, finally tossed it in the trash several months later. Sometimes the universe assists you with a petty revenge. I did not expect this to take off. Sorry if you see this, Chelsea, it was me. This happened 10 plus years ago, and I'm happy to report that we've all gone to therapy since then and are thankfully no longer terrible human beings. Now, a couple of things to address here. Why didn't I confront her? I hated confrontation, was a huge people pleaser, and wanted everyone to like me, and enjoyed watching her suffer. Again, therapy. I'm thankfully no longer like this. Visa gift cards don't have names. Google Comcast Visa promo card real quick. The Target gift card itself said happy birthday, and my friend's mom wrote to my favorite son underneath. It was still semi-legible when I found her wallet. Locksmiths don't make car keys? Apparently some do. In the end, she had her car towed to the dealership. I do remember she called a locksmith the first day her wallet was missing because she initially thought the wallet was in her car. She was super mad that the locksmith charged her for the weekend visit without actually unlocking her car. Was he taking advantage of a stupid college girl? Maybe. This was over a decade ago. I was 21, and I'm sure my vodka-addled brain did not fully absorb the details of her whole ordeal. Turn her into the cops. Bro, have you met college students? Do you know how much illegal crap they do? It briefly crossed my mind, but petty revenge was far more satisfying. She had an absolute meltdown and missed a few days of work at a newish job dealing with all this. Commenter says, she left the stuff she stole in your car and kept her title in the glove box? She's a dumb thief. And OP says, extremely. Yeah, some people have their eyes set on something so hard they neglect everything else and do stupid stuff. Terrible HOA story time with an update. I purchased a townhouse a year and a half ago, and I love my house. My neighbor, who I share a front porch with, however, is making my life a living heck. From the start, she had constant parties, and her boyfriend turned their second room into a music studio, so constant thumping and bass coming through my living room wall. I'd tell her to turn it down, and it would stop for a while, but then start up again. He would smoke in that room, MJ and cigarettes, and hotbox the whole room. It started to make my living room stink like a dirty bar. Like, I don't care about MJ, but dude, open a window. Don't hotbox the place. They constantly fought, and he finally moved out. Things were calm for a while, but then it was random people at all hours. I have a Ring doorbell that's on a battery that's supposed to last 10 months on one charge. The constant in and out from her and her friends killed it in 2 months. It's literally all night and day. This is when I realized that they're dealing illegal substances and not just MJ. She informed me that her door was kicked in by the police before I moved in. I have no idea why she told me this, but she did. So her door does not close right. It's a constant door slamming 30 to 40 times a day. Oh, and she doesn't work, so she's always home and in and out with random guys with duffel bags. The slamming is so bad that it's knocked mirrors and pictures off of my walls. I tried to be nice and understanding, but after a few of her visitors opened my screen door and violently pounded on my door to let them in, I'm done being understanding. The constant yelling on the porch, the door slamming and banging on the walls, the smell of mold, pee, and cigarettes coming through the walls, random guys in and out all night making more noise. She had a kid but does not have custody, and she has this girl from time to time while these creepy dudes come in and out. I'm worried about the kid. She barely knows these guys and even leaves her keys on the porch so anyone can just come in even if she's not home. I try not to let crap bug me, but I am done. I've called the police, I've filed noise complaints, I've explained about the illegal stuff, and the kid, they do nothing. Even though dispatch knows who she is, the woman I spoke with was like, "Oh, it's her again?" My HOA won't do a dang thing, and I'm at the end of it. Is there anything I can do besides selling my townhouse and not mentioning that they be buying places next to a loud druggy troll? Part 2. The HOA still refused to do crap. Apparently, the HOA president is the person I bought my condo from. He knew she was like this and couldn't rent to anyone, so he was lucky he found an out-of-state buyer who would never see this trailer trash dealer before it was too late. June 2nd at 11:30 at night. Someone shot up her front door trying to get in. The police were called and it was a whole event. Her front door is 5 feet away from mine, and my master bedroom is partially above the porch. So if this jerk lost control of his weapon and fired up, it would have gone through my floor. 10 bullet holes, 8 in her door alone. I was the one who called 911 first. The police asked to speak with me when I came down and asked if I knew anything. They told me that my neighbor informed them that it must have been a break-in attempt. I scoffed and I was like, "Hey, unless she has the Hope Diamond stashed in that dumpster pile, no way. I knew this would happen." They asked why I thought that, and I told them that she's a dealer. Then they asked to speak to me inside. I explained everything. The cop asked me if I lived here when they raided the house before, and I informed him that no, but had I known that had happened, I wouldn't be living here. They asked why I didn't let them know this was happening, and I couldn't help but laugh. I did multiple times. They asked me more questions and then made some comments about them having someone pressing pills for them and then they were on their way. I've since had a full security system installed with cameras and I'm looking for an attorney to take care of all this. The previous raid was not disclosed to me. Her lifestyle choices and constant chaos were not disclosed. I want the HOA or the state to seize her unit. She currently has 3 charges against her that she's going to court for the substances, and I know she can't pay for anything. The screaming and screeching at people with her door open gave me that much of the story. I'm venting and still trying to process this bull crap. Am I overreacting? I just want her gone. No, not at all. I mean, that's the stuff you gotta know before you move in, and if it was not disclosed to you, somebody's being shady here. She should call CPS about the child too. What would have you done? Shady HOA dealings exposed in non-existent HOA by the Raccoon 2. And it has an update. So I bought my house 4.5 years ago from the company that built it. The house I bought was new construction in a neighborhood that had existed for about 8 years. Even now, there are still a few empty lots in the neighborhood. Last year, I received a document in my mailbox, which confused me, as it was a handful of pages stapled together. The title on the first page was, "Restrictive Covenants for Our Neighborhood." After reading through the documents, I was confused, as it was supposedly the covenants for the homeowners association that governed our neighborhood. I immediately contacted the builder of my home asking about an HOA. He had his realtor call me, and she assured me that there was no HOA. And looking at the online website for our county, there is no organization registered with the name of our neighborhood, which would be required of an HOA. So I also talked to one of my neighbors, whose house had also been built by the same builder, and asked if he had found a copy in his mailbox. He had, and I explained that I'd talked to the builder and his realtor and that there was no HOA. He was relieved, as his wife was really angry about thinking that they'd been duped into buying a house in an HOA neighborhood. While we were standing in his front yard talking, another neighbor walked up and he also said that he'd received a copy and he knew the person who was distributing them. She was really upset that commercial vehicles were being allowed to park overnight in our neighborhood. There are a couple of work trucks that park in the driveways of a few of our neighbors at night. One of the key things to note is that the document was not mailed to me. Somebody made the copies and then put a copy in my mailbox. No envelope and no postage. I live in the USA and accessing someone else's mailbox is a crime. So I took the document to a copy store and I had them make me a couple of copies without removing the original staple from the corner. I then took the original to the local USPS post office. I showed them the document, and they explained how it came into my possession. The clerk behind the counter said I would need to talk to the postmaster, and when he came to the counter, I showed him the document. I explained about it appearing in my mailbox. He was scowling by the time I finished, and I pointed out the last page, which was a letter complaining about all the people that were violating the number 8 of the covenants, which was a prohibition of parking commercial vehicles on the roads or driveways in the neighborhood, stating that all commercial vehicles must be parked in a closed garage. So the letter also asked for our support in electing the person who had distributed the copies to the HOA board. It contained the name, the address, and the phone number of the person. The postmaster saw that last page, broke out into a really evil grin, and asked if he could have the document. I told him that the document he was looking at was the original that I'd found in my mailbox, and that I had copies for my own files without removing the staple. I also told him that I'd spoken to several of my neighbors, and they had also received copies in their mailboxes. The postmaster thanked me and said that he would be calling the person and explaining to them how many federal laws they'd violated by accessing someone else's mailbox. So my neighbors and I, we are still HOA free. An update. Now another thing to consider is that an HOA is a business and legally has to file certain reports every year to document fees collected and expenses paid, and have a certain number of meetings every year with notifications publicly posted of the meeting dates, the times, and the locations, and hold elections for members of the board, which also requires notifications to be publicly posted. At least that's true in Tennessee where I live. There are stone walls with signs at the entry to the neighborhood. As an example, if the sign says Charles Place, the road I lived on would have been named Charles Road, and the crazy neighbor would then think that there's a Charles Place HOA. The Tennessee Secretary of State's office has a business information search page on their website, and when I search for the first word in the name of our community, it comes up with 3 entries, all of which are a construction company with slightly different names like Charles Construction Incorporated, LLC, and then Incorporated with capital letters, with different ending dates. The 2 that are inactive show the same city as where I live, but the active entry is in a different city about 300 miles away. There are 2 words on the signs at the entrance to the community, and if I search for both words, there are no records found. Also, in the 4.5 years that I've lived here, I've never been asked to pay any HOA dues or fees, nor have I ever received notification of an HOA meeting or HOA election. Based on what was in the letter, my neighbors started this whole mess in order to ban all commercial vehicles from parking on the street or in driveways. In order to start an HOA, a vote has to be taken of all the property owners within the proposed boundaries of the HOA, with a simple majority required. But one of the nice things is that regardless of how the vote goes, an existing property owner can still choose to not join the new HOA and would not be subject to fees or fines or any new rules created by the new HOA. But once the non-member sells their property, then the new buyer would be required to join the HOA. Terrible HOA Karen in neighbor, who is also on the HOA board, is nitpicking on us and threatens to call the police. What do we do? Posted by QS Muta. I recently bought a condo, a 2nd floor unit, and have been trying to settle in with my family, 2 kids, 12-year-old and 3-year-old. My problem is our 65-plus old neighbor who's also on the board of the HOA. She lives alone with her dog right next door to us. She's been kind of bullying us from day one. Every time she passes by us, she gives this disapproving and demeaning look, which I never understood why. Our downstairs neighbor who came in and introduced themselves told us that she is like that to everyone and warned us to stay away from her. She has been telling us to do a lot of things, like park our car much too far away from the parking line, even though we parked ours much well inside the lines, because she wants more space to open her car doors. We agreed because we wanted to be nice. She keeps telling our kid not to play in the front of the building. This is a gated community and all kids play out in front in the evenings. We agreed. She then said that he should not play behind the building also, which is mostly woods and trees. We agreed to that too. But our 12-year-old, being 12 years old, went some 30 feet into the tree area and sat underneath the trees with his two friends and was playing with sticks. This woman comes knocking on our door and yells at me. I said, okay, I will tell my child to not play there. But I got real ticked off when she said, when does school start? Very soon, I suppose. Can't wait for them to go back, in front of my kid. He felt very hurt, and I convinced him, saying that sometimes people can be mean and we should not be bothered by it. Last week, at around 11:30 at night, my husband was sitting in our balcony spray painting a picture frame. She came downstairs to walk her dog, looked up, saw us, and asked what we were doing. My husband said, spray painting. She gave some weird BS reasons as to why we're not allowed to spray paint or switch on our balcony light after 10 p.m. and that there are rules. She also had the management email us the rule book. We read through it, and there was nothing relating to balcony lights or spray painting or anything remotely related to it. Yesterday, I was spray painting a footboard in the evening, and I finished doing it at around 10:30 at night. She saw me cleaning up and then asked, "Are you painting again?" I said, "Yeah." She replied, "I've told you already not to do that. It's 10:30. I politely and very calmly said, "Hey, I'm only spray painting and it is not disturbing anyone." To which she angrily replied, "There are rules, and I'm complaining about you to the police tomorrow," and walked away. I brought in the headboard 30 minutes later after they dried. She does not live directly above or below us, and there's no way she would even know that I was painting if she hadn't looked up into my balcony. There was absolutely no noise except from the very small spraying noise from the rattle can, which I am 200% sure is not audible 10 feet away from where I was painting. We did not make a peep when moving the headboard also. We feel like we're being bossed around by this woman. A few others feel this way too, but they've not openly said it to us, but have implied it. She has lived in this building for over 25 years, and we are only 2 months in. We are Asians and immigrants. Any police complaints against us could affect our visa status. At the same time, I don't want to be walking over eggshells in my own home. I would like to live with self-respect. We just bought this place and moving is not an option. What do I do? This commenter lays down the truth. It's time for you to read, know, and understand every rule in the HOA like the back of your hand. This way, she has no power over you. She assumes that you will comply because she thinks that she knows more. Use the rules to your advantage and don't give her the satisfaction of you breaking even the most minor of rules. This is a ridiculous story of Karen trying to one-up OP and the HOA fining, and it's a crazy mess. You gotta hear it. It's called "It Is Your Truck After All," posted by Deleted. The background. Automobile insurance adjusters navigate a valley filled with mendacity and misrepresentation. For every 10 people I spoke with, at least half either omitted something material, lied, or committed fraud. If mendacity actually smelled like death, then I was surrounded by an ever-present stench. This story of malicious compliance is one way to clear the air. Helpful points. The named insured on a policy is required to follow the insurance policy contract to obtain coverage, and usually the DMV will have the name of the lender on the title. A total loss vehicle is stored around 45 to 60 days before storage charges start. The story. Mr. Debtor had a very fancy, new to him, fix or repair daily truck. That truck had every conceivable option and was ultimately an overpowered vehicle for an inexperienced driver. Surprise! Mr. Debtor wrecked that POS, piece of excrement, within 3 months of purchasing it. If you're going to wreck it, then go all out. This vehicle had a completely smashed front end with all the airbags deployed, rollover damage to all panels, frame damages, broken glass, and of course, most of the engine compartment obliterated. In short, this car is called a total loss. The cost to repair the vehicle is more than 75% of its value and is not feasible to repair. Mr. Debtor's minor physical injuries were eclipsed by the mortal blow received by his pride. He let me know how I was directly responsible for his drunk driving crash, his injuries, and that I needed to go to heck and live there. This was the first call. Lovely. Fast forward, and I've given Mr. Debtor an offer to resolve his total loss. I checked the DMV. No lender is listed on the title. Total loss call goes like this. "Hey, we're ready to settle this claim for you. Do you have the title?" I say. Mr. Debtor replies, "Yes." "Do you have the loan on the car?" No, of course not. Insert long and misogynistic rant regarding his wealth, status, and superiority. Thank you for sharing. I can come to meet with you today, sign the title transfer, and give you the funds as you are listed as the owner. No, I have to get the title out of the safe deposit boxes at the bank. Over the next 60 days, Mr. Debtor hems and haws about this title for over 2 months. Every week I call him and I mail a letter regarding the need to sign and mitigate damages like towing, storage, and so on. Which brings us to the phone call that let the fresh breeze in. The phone call that changes everything is at 10:30 a.m. on a Monday. Hi, I say, it's been a while and I'm still needing that title from you to settle your claim. You're harassing me. No, sir, I'm fulfilling my obligations to you as a customer. I need to get your title to pay your claim back. Listen here, you are on my schedule, not the other way around. You think you're, insert elevator music of curses, insults, and misogyny. Sir, I'm just trying to save you the hassle of dealing with the truck. Storage is starting soon. He interrupts. I'm going to call you when I'm good and ready. You'll get the title then. If you call me again, I'm filing a police report. It's your car. Deal with it. And the phone call ends. Mr. Debtor's given me a clear and unmistakable indicator that he is not cooperating and is in violation of his contractual responsibilities. I can't abandon salvage. I can, however, do this. 11 a.m. on a Monday. Hi, salvage vendor. You have Mr. Debtor's truck on the lot. He's not ready to resolve his claim. Can you tow it back to 123 Debtor Heck Lane? Yes, that's right. In his driveway, please. And with that, Mr. Debtor's wondrous wreck of a vehicle is towed to his property. At 1 p.m. on a Monday. What the heck, he says. The HOA called. You can't leave that in my driveway. I'll sue you. My neighbors are asking questions, blah, blah, blah. Hi, Mr. Debtor. I'm sorry for the confusion. You see, the truck is yours, after all. You're on the title and have refused to help me process this claim. As you requested, the vehicle will remain on your property until you're ready. My HOA is fining me. You must pick up the truck now. No, you still haven't provided the title. When you're ready, let me know. Is there anything else I can help you with? Slowly deflating, Mr. Debtor replies, You can't do this. Sir, the truck is yours. You've refused to complete the paperwork and I have no legal standing to store the vehicle indefinitely. Remember that valley of mendacity I mentioned? Brace yourself in 3, 2, 1. Mr. Debtor in a low growling noise. I'm broke, title pawn. I'm sorry? I don't have the title. It's at I'm broke, title pawn. I will not call him a liar. I will not call him a liar. I will not call him a liar. Oh, sorry that I misunderstood that you had the title. Can you give me their number? And with that, the dragon was slayed. So I called the subprime high-interest title pawn company. They were surprised to learn about the vehicle being wrecked, and the balance remaining, $3,200 and 13 months. Mr. Debtor thought we were going to hold his wreck for 13 months. He signed, and the lender was paid. Oh, the vehicle. I had signed the paperwork in hand and had the vehicle picked up on Tuesday morning. His round-trip tow back to the salvage cost him an additional $150. Non-cooperation is expensive. This story takes place in an HOA, and it's called Ex-Friend Expected Free Rent, posted by Deleted. My lifelong friend wanted to live in my condo that I wasn't actively using because I had relocated to another city, apartment, before I was going to then rent out the condo. I told him that he could use it for a small amount of time until he found his own place, maybe even 6 months, just not for too long. I paid $280 a month in HOA dues. It had a pool, security, and so on. And property taxes ran me about $200 a month, plus the electric bill was then assessed by unit each month. I told him he could stay at the condo for $550 a month, just my cost to keep it going, and this was in Southern California. He agreed to pay, didn't seem to grumble or anything, and I honestly thought that I was doing something really nice for my longest time friend. An 820 square foot condo with a pool for $550 a month in California. You're just not going to find that. I wasn't making a dime off of him. I just didn't want to lose money and subsidize his lifestyle out of my pocket. Fast forward a few months. My other friends all inform me that he's been texting them about what a B I am that I dare charge him rent to stay there. How could a friend charge money for that? My friends didn't know what was the deal, so they asked me, and I told them that I'm not charging him any rent. I'm literally just asking that he pay the cost of the unit and nothing more. For reference, when he left eventually, I rented it for several years at $1,300 a month, so he was not even paying half of market rent. I owned the condo free and clear, so I had lower costs with no mortgage, thus allowing me to charge him less and break even. Finally, when we eventually went to move my stuff out of there, and yes, it was fully furnished too, with a nice TV, kitchen items, everything you could need. He had broken about a quarter of my dishes, he'd left a used rubber hanging on a trash can, and while my 105-pound girlfriend and I packed my stuff, he sat on the couch, not offering to help at all, even once in 3 days. He laughed about the rubber, and he took a giant dump in the bathroom and clogged the toilet, requiring a plumber to fix. And then, when we went to dinner, he forgot his wallet and never paid me back. He even woke us up early after we were up late packing by talking on the phone with online friends that he met on various chat forums. We didn't remain friends long after that, needless to say. I couldn't believe just how oblivious that is to just get such a good deal and then badmouth the person for doing you a favor and then trash their place. I spent a bunch more on housekeeping, and my real estate agent who was renting it out after he left said that the housekeeping service had never seen a place so filthy. We noticed that too. Besides the rubber, there was just dirt and filth everywhere. He wiped it out. Do you agree with this commenter? If that was my own brother, I'd have his butt on the street immediately after finding out that he was crap talking such a sweet deal. And OP drops this face palm right here. It kinda makes it funnier if I mention that he had inherited over $100,000 just a few years earlier, quit his job, blew through the money in 2.5 years completely, and then started trying to mooch wherever possible. I urged him to invest that money and continue working, but he didn't. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. What do you think? Oh boy, my HOA filed a property insurance claim for a hurricane that happened 4 years ago and got $3 million. Now they're trying to bail on fixing hurricane damage on my condo because you bought the unit with the drywall that way. So I live in North Carolina. I bought this condo in a 14-unit building in 2022 through a normal conventional loan. They had people here in late 2021, shortly after I moved in, documenting damage from a hurricane that happened in 2018 to use for their claim, like taking 3D pictures of each room, checking windows, running video scopes in the walls to check for mold, wall moisture and moisture barrier, so on. Well, they got about $3 million from the insurance claim and started by replacing roofs, storm drains, mailboxes, painting, and external things. Then they sent an email out to send them any remaining internal repairs that still need done from the hurricane. My unit had water in it in 2018. They sent someone in to cut the bottom 18 inches of drywall out, dry out the place, and replace the drywall. Whoever they had to do it just free-handed the corners with no bead and did a terrible sloppy putty job so that you can see the seam on every wall and the corners look like Play-Doh. I submitted this for repair. They sent a guy to quote the job, and then they sent the HOA board members in to look at the unit. The two older ladies from the board said that to do it right, there would be a lot of work and repainting, and the job is bigger than they want to do. They even asked if my insurance would paint so that they didn't have to. They also learned at that time that I didn't live in the unit during the storm. When I followed up a few days later, they said that, unfortunately, it looks like that we don't have to do your repairs after talking to our lawyers. Since you bought the condo as is, you took ownership of previous poorly done repairs. So, essentially, they are saying that we only have to spend this money to fix your unit if you owned since 2018 and we're here during the hurricane. Mind you, several of the units have changed hands in 4 hours. I don't understand how me purchasing the unit would absolve the HOA from their responsibilities. I didn't sign anything assuming financial responsibility for those drywall repairs. I talked to my realtor and the closing/title lawyer, and they said that they don't think that makes sense, but neither does litigation work. The HOA isn't a party to the home purchase. That's a contract between the buyer and seller. They used my unit to inflate their insurance claim and are not trying to use money from the claim to make adequate repairs, which I've read could be property insurance fraud. I sent them an email back explaining that other lawyers and the realtor do not agree, and they then sent me an email telling me that they would have someone else do the work. And then 2 days later, they want their attorney to talk to mine before proceeding. I don't really want to incur lawyer fees because they don't want to do the right thing and they want to pocket the money, but I would love to have the drywall fixed. Is what they're doing wrong here? Am I wrong that the repair should be done if they claim the damage to get some money? Do you agree with this? So if they had it fixed but it was done poorly, it sounds like an issue between the HOA and the contractor, and that OP could go after the contractor. OP says that the contractor was fly-by-night, it seems. I asked them the same thing about having them do it the right way, and they said it could have even been volunteers. I mentioned the drywall to the seller, but it was not a condition of the purchase, as it was the HOA's responsibility and not the seller's. There was no paperwork for the HOA. I just got a letter that I had dues and needed to create an account online. What would you do? Is the HOA being shady, or how would you handle it? HOA is pulling some seriously strange and seemingly nefarious stunts. Can you guys give me any insights? Posted by Real Estate Toss. I'm a first-time homebuyer running into some seriously weird issues with an HOA and curious about the legality of some of the stunts that they're pulling. I'm a veteran using the VA loan. Nothing is closed yet, but things are getting close enough to start worrying. Sorry for the long post, but there's a lot to question. My partner and I are purchasing a condo unit in Chicago. We've already agreed to a price with the seller, and our lender has approved the loan. The appraisal and the inspection are both completed as well. When it came time to drop off some money orders to the front office, we started seeing some serious problems. The building manager was great, up until we handed her the sales contract and the number for money down was still blank. Our lender told us to leave this blank for the time being just so VA loan stuff could clear, and it didn't need to be there until way closer to closing anyway. Here's where the fun starts. The building manager asked what our loan to value was rather quickly, and we were stumped because as newbies, we aren't great with a lot of terms. We told her we were doing a VA loan, and she immediately snaps back with, "Oh, so do you have the 20 months of assessment fees available to pay?" We had absolutely no idea what she was talking about and let her know that. She prints off page 22 and 23 of their 40-page HOA rulebook and shows us a clause buried in there where if you put down 0%, you owe 20 months of assessment fees. She did some quick math to show that we would end up owing just shy of what a 10% down payment would look like. She also included 2 parking spots and cable and internet. The parking spots are on a wait list, and we were like 8 spots down, so she pulled those numbers right out of thin air. And the cable and internet, it's already on the assessment fee, and she listed it again. So I'm feeling like it's pretty obvious that she's trying to just scare us off. It doesn't end there. She's also requesting that we each file a credit report through a company that they use. Again, after we've already been through this with our lender and bank and received credit scores from Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. I asked if they could just get this from our lender since it's, well, already been done, and I was given a stern no, that it has to be through this specific company. They gave us a number, an extension, and asked for this name. For what it's worth, both of our credit scores, well, they're very good. Certainly more than sufficient for this place. They've also requested that the next HOA board meeting they have, that we meet them remotely so they can basically interview us, and it sounds like they're going to approve us moving in. The 20 months of assessment payments were provided in the HOA rulebook that they gave us, but we didn't receive it at the beginning when we were discussing with the seller. It was also buried in an email with a total of 63 PDFs, only one of which was the rulebook. Everything else was just cover pages, meeting minutes, small potatoes, and nothing pages. No one except the HOA was aware of this 20-month assessment fee. Not us, not our realtor, our lawyer, lender, the seller's broker, the seller's lawyer. Nobody had a clue until we told them the building manager hit us with it, and everyone's arguing that this fee should have been front and center. Also, none of us, seller's side included, have ever heard of such a clause, and we're all in agreement that it sounds absolutely insane. Our lender told us to just basically tell them to kick rocks on having our credit hit again for their report, as this is a pretty bad thing to do during a major purchase. If they want credit scores, they can get them from him, if he even deems it necessary. Our realtor suspects that voting in people in the building sounds like something that a co-op does and doubts this is even legal. Our lawyer is looking into how they got around this being a form of discrimination. So I'm wondering, Has anyone seen anything like this? How can we even hack this apart? Is this stuff even legal? Even if we beat these fees, what are the odds that the HOA just messes with us the entire time we're there? It isn't too late to back out and cut our losses, but it's getting way too close to let it go. These comments are perfect. Imagine if you bought this place and then needed to sell it in a tight market. Would you want these people scaring away your potential buyers? If I was a condo owner, I'd be ticked. Honestly, if you can walk away from this BS, you should. They are letting you know up front that they are going to be difficult at best to deal with, and there's no parking. Walk away. Is OP screwed? $0 in HOA reserves, posted by Smoke Ride and Get Paid. Question: how screwed are we? The backstory. We purchased our townhome in our hometown in California in April 2022 when it was an insane market. By the time we received the HOA disclosures, we had been well underway with the escrow. We reviewed the financial stuff and saw that they only had $27,000 in reserves budgeted for the fiscal year ending 6/30/22. We really liked the place, and this was our 20th offer, so we decided to continue with escrow since we were already so deep in. And, like I said before, the market was just nuts. I've tried to be involved and informed from the start. There has been a total of 2 board meetings since we've been here in April 2022. The first one I attended was a super awkward 5 to 10 minute Zoom call cut short due to drama between the HOA board and the old property management company. The other meeting I stupidly did not attend because I misunderstood the meeting notice and thought it was for the board only. I'm still learning the ins and outs of the HOA. Anyway, so long story short, I just found out that we have nothing in reserves. From property management, they said, see attached income statement for the month of February. You will see that the association has no money. I don't know where the membership would expect the association to get money to make repairs, like roof replacement, drywall, decks, and so on, that so many units needed due to the crazy rain we just had. A fully funded reserve for an association of your size with the components that are the association's responsibility is approximately $350,000, and at the very least, you should have over $100,000. As of this email, after paying for the mini deck repairs that were done in the complex due to the rain, the association has $203.93 in the reserve account, with $14,735 in pending bills to be paid for roof repairs. The balance of the operating account, which is where the monthly assessments are deposited and the monthly bills are paid, currently has a balance of $3,740.98. If we have no money, how long is it going to take us to build a reserve of $100 to $350,000? Decades, right? Gosh. So I think it is what it is. I can get on the board, even though my job is very demanding and home life with a toddler is bonkers. I think it would be best if I volunteered to be on the board. The president already asked me twice. Commenter drops the answer. Usually when this happens, it's shortly followed by an increase in HOA dues. The amount of increase will depend on how many houses are in your development and what your reserve goal is. In your case, it sounds like you may be seeing a few $100 increase in HOA fees. HOA forcing me to paint a second time, posted by Garlic J's my dad. December 23rd, yes, 2 days before Christmas, my HOA served me a notice stating that I had 2 weeks to repaint my house as the colors were fading. I didn't have the cash or the time to have it done in 2 weeks, so I asked for an extension, which the HOA denied. I somehow found a painter that had an opening just after the notice expired, and the HOA agreed to let it slide. My wife looked for colors all day, and I emailed the swatches to the HOA for approval. They approved the new colors, and the painter started work shortly after. I spent my entire savings and had to work extra to cover the painter, but they did a good job, and we were happy with the results. Now, a week later, the HOA has given us a notice that the color of the house is not the color that was approved, so it must be returned to the original colors. After some investigating by me, the color on the walls turned out to be a bit bluer than the grayish blue swatches would lead you to think. It's still a nice color, so I asked the HOA to just approve of these colors instead, to which they denied. My question is, what can I do about this? I feel as if I'm being targeted for no reason. The HOA just repeats, please return the house to the original coloring whenever I contact them about this. I have nothing left to pay for a painter a second time, nor do I have the time or materials to paint the whole house myself. The HOA is not backing down on this judgment. Should I be getting lawyers involved? Anyone else been in a similar situation? I'm checking with my painter to see if they mixed up the paint somehow. I've been here for about a year, and my only other violation was a fence that needed power washing that I completed in a matter of days. I don't think anyone would be out to get me. I'm Latino, and I live in a primarily Black and Latino neighborhood. Only about 24 houses total. I'm going to request a formal hearing with the HOA. All of my communications with them have been very impersonal over email, so maybe after stating my case to them, they will understand. If they choose to escalate, I'll be getting a lawyer involved. Already have a friend doing a bit of digging. Commenter asked and OP answered. They approved in writing? If so, I tell them to get lost. An OP says they approved the collar swatches from the manufacturer, but they disapproved of the collar once they saw it on the walls. What would you do? Let me know. This story just happened and I don't even know how it's legal. It's insane. It's called Karen Manager Made Me Stand Inside the Freezer as Punishment. Was this legal? Posted by ThrowRA 10/27/10. A few months ago in June, I started my job. It's a fast food restaurant, but it's also my first job. I'm 19 female in the state of Florida. I'm going to say the name of the company is Arby's, but not the specific store. On August 24th, 2023, I was working 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. that day, and somebody asked me to stay late 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. I received 2 30-minute breaks for each shift. I was talking with another shift manager who asked if I'll be okay and comfortable. I said that I'm fine, I'm just tired and slow. Assistant manager, 58 female, hears this and asked me to follow her into the freezer and made me stand there as she screamed at me, saying that she disliked lazy, annoying employees like me that complain and whine about the job. She said she's a widow living by herself that only makes $15 an hour and that she's tired too, but doesn't complain. Then states that it's unfair nobody asked her permission for an extra worker ruining her plans and labor. Then also states that corporate's been up her butt and she's always getting in trouble because of the troublesome new hires. Fast forward after the conversation, she told me to stay where I was standing and think about if I want to work or not, and she will come back to check on me. I'm not sure how long I was in there because she confiscated my cell phone after she left the freezer. The work uniform is a t-shirt plus back pants and apron, so it was very cold. A different manager, 20 male, found me as he came inside to get a box and asked what the heck I was doing. I told him it was cold and I felt tired, so I sat down and closed my eyes. He told me not to put up with assistant manager's crap and helped me outside and gave me a jacket and a hot drink. I sat at the desk trying to feel better before I went back to work. Apparently, she clocked me out the time I was in the freezer, so I wasn't even paid for that. I did as I was told, but shift manager 20 male said that he ended up arguing with her about mistreating me and the previous employees who all quit. On August 8th, she yelled at a girl, 16, for making the wrong sandwich, who went to the bathroom to cry and called her mom. The girl quit, but HR has so much evidence on her. Side note, there was a big store meeting in May 2022 before I started working there. I heard from the other managers that the higher-ups yelled at her and wrote her up for mistreating employees. They stated that HR did a big investigation and gave her a warning and a mandatory ethics course. I immediately called HR after the freezer incident, and there are cameras and witnesses that day. There has been a week-long investigation and meetings. Due to Hurricane Idalia and Labor Day, it's been a little delayed. HR said that they reprimanded her and would be giving me a $50 bonus compensation. I was wondering if what happened to me was ethical. I have a hopeful feeling that all the previous string of incidents and all the former complaints filed against the assistant manager are helping HR and corporate see that what she's doing is not good. I also have not signed anything or agreed to anything. There have been separate meetings without me, and 2 meetings I have went to at work was one with the general manager, assistant manager, and the district supervisor and the area supervisor. The second meeting was with the higher-ups, corporate, and HR. I have taken the guidance of what people have told me to hopefully make a chance at this workplace, including a better work environment. For people asking why I just didn't leave or why I put up with this, I don't know really what to do, and I had a lot of exhaustion from working the first shift. I also heard a lot of things about her and the incidents where people have made complaints to her because she yells at them or treats them bad. This was my first job because many others, Chipotle, Panera Bread, Target, and etc., didn't hire me. Also, assistant manager has been working for 23 years now, although she gets transferred around every few years. Not sure if it's complaint related. She has been at this exact store for 3 years now. I'm told that her work ethic has always been like this. I don't know her too well as she is night shift manager, so I only see her if I happen to work nights. I do not. I'm a college student who prefers working mostly 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. 2 to 3 days a week. I need money to pay for college and bills. We've had one big store-wide meeting where everybody, 16 workers at the time, had to come and sit down to talk about treating employees with respect. Now, the phone confiscation thing is legitimate and allowed by the company and store. Many other people have had their phones confiscated. After I left the freezer and clocked back in, she confiscated this other college guy team member's cell phone and put it in a safe. I'm not sure if it can help me in any way, but I did mention it to the higher-ups in corporate. Do you agree with this comment? Talk to a lawyer, but also don't let people treat you this way. The Arby's Corporation in all likelihood will terminate that manager and probably offer you a nuisance settlement like $2,500 if you sign a release. You'll give half of that to your lawyer. Far more valuable is the lesson you've learned. Walk out of the freezer next time. Know your worth. No worker in this country deserves that kind of treatment, and we have laws to ensure that no worker has to tolerate it. Well, this just sounds like a lawsuit waiting to happen, doesn't it? I mean, I wouldn't want to take a tiny little, oh, here, just take this money and run kind of thing when half of it's going to a lawyer. This is crazy. I mean, what do you think about this? How would you handle this insane Karen literally calls the cops on OP? This is called evict me without cause and only give me till midnight to be out. No problem. Posted by Sean NJ222. So, once upon a time, I was living in a, not legal, basement apartment of an old Hungarian woman's house. I was poor. The place was cheaper than what was around, so I took it. How bad could it be? She was horrific. At first, she was an okay landlady, but then things started to turn. First, I noticed that things were off when I got home from work. Ever get that feeling that someone was in your room? Yeah, that. So I asked her if she'd been in there, and she denied it. Then I set up a camera, and I caught her on camera. I asked her again, and she denied it, saying that she's never gone into my apartment without telling me. And then I showed her the video, and she got mad at me. I work nights. One time, she came in during the daytime, and I was there, in bed, naked under the sheets. So I woke up when she came in and asked if I could help her, and she said no, and left. After that, she would call me lazy boy when she saw me, assuming I didn't work since it was at night. Things kept getting worse. She'd sometimes shut off the water when she thought I was using too much, or when I refused to share my Wi-Fi password with her other tenant. Finally, one night I had some friends over for a birthday. There were 6 of us total, and it was around 11 p.m., and trust me when I say, we were not being loud at all. Literally, just hanging around the coffee table eating cheesecake, talking and laughing. She came into my apartment, started yelling that I was having a loud party with too many people in the middle of the night. She actually came and grabbed my shirt, telling me everyone had to leave. Oh heck no, that was it. So I pushed her off of me and the police were called. That Monday, she left a really poorly written eviction notice on my door. Seriously, handwritten. Telling me to be out by Saturday by midnight. Here's the malicious compliance. By 11:59 p.m. that Saturday, I had all my stuff in the U-Haul. My friends and I were just working on bagging up the trash and the other stuff for the dump when she came in and yelled at me that it was past midnight. No problem. I got up and I left, leaving a huge pile of junk in the bedroom and the storage room, easily 2 pickup trucks worth of crap that I wasn't taking. She actually called my father, who was my emergency contact on my application, to tell me that it cost her $400 to haul it all away and that I owed her money. He blocked the number. An update. She was showing the apartment when I was still living there. She didn't tell me. So when she let 2 strangers in the daytime, waking me up again, I stood up, fully naked, full staffed, and said that I wouldn't rent from her if it were the last apartment in town. The couple quickly left. This Karen gets exposed in front of the whole neighborhood. She's actually an HOA president too. This one's posted by OWED and Chapeau. Let's see how. So this story takes place a few days ago. I live in an apartment and I was cleaning the cave with my father. There, I found a big box with all of my old toy cars. All of them look pristine, and there are some that honestly look very good. So I say to myself, hey, those toys seem to work. Maybe I can give them to the kids that live nearby. So I take the box upstairs and I put a message saying that I am giving them away. After maybe 2 minutes, I have an answer from a mom that we are going to name Karen B. She says that she's interested and that if I want, I can get them to her or she will send her son to pick up the box. In my extreme kindness, I say that I will deliver. Then she gave me her address, saying that her son is at her home. And then I noticed. They are the neighbor next door and she does have a kid, but they're something like 15 and 23. That's when I understood that she doesn't want the box for her kids, but to sell them. Now I face a dilemma. I can give her the box and let her win, or don't, and she's going to be a pain in the butt later. She's the president of an HOA, and I have no choice, so I choose the first option, give the box to her son, ask why he wanted it, and apparently it's for a collection. And I come home fuming a bit and feeling defeated. And then I saw a post on the Convo from a lady that I know and that says that her church is looking for toys for children in need. So I wrote, sorry, the Karen family took the whole box for her kids' collection, but I'm really sure that she can give a few to such a good association. Karen then posted a really salty message saying that of course she will and blah blah blah. But her pettiness and BS excuses were showed to the public, so I feel much better about the whole case. Our neighbors are an absolute nightmare. Is our HOA genuinely not doing their job, or am I being impatient? Posted by the Drunkest Coug. For context, we built a new home and moved in fall 2022. Prior to this, our now next door neighbors finished their home and moved in a couple weeks before us. We'd occasionally go visit our home as it was under construction and immediately noticed our next door neighbors put an old chicken coop and a disabled SUV in their backyard. The chickens are unbelievably loud and they squawk at all hours of the day. Along with this, there was a ton of general trash and clutter, tarps and scrap wood, plastic bins, and so on. We were initially panicked but thought that they would eventually get this cleaned up as they settled into their home during the coming months, as we knew the HOA CC&Rs allowed none of this. The HOA also requires all initial landscaping to be completed within 3 months of ownership, so we thought that they'd be starting that process as well. Nope, never happened. Only became worse. Throughout the rest of the year, we were reasonably preoccupied settling into our home, and then winter came where there isn't really any good reason to be enjoying your backyard in 5-degree weather. We knew the issues at our neighbor's house persisted, but assumed that they'd be getting things cleaned up in the spring. As 2023 rolled around, nothing at all was done. We tend to take a very live and let live approach to things, and we know our neighbors have several children, so we gave them the benefit of the doubt and assumed that they would start cleaning things up eventually. In late March of 2023, 2 of their kids were climbing on the large rock retaining wall that we have in our front yard. Wanting to keep my home insurance premiums low and not wanting one of them to fall and injure themselves, I went outside and I politely asked them to stay off of the rock wall. The very next day, I hear a loud commotion out front and I go outside to see what's going on. The same 2 kids have pulled roughly 30 rocks out of the retaining wall and thrown them onto the ground. Much sterner, I tell them to put the rocks back immediately and stay off of the wall. As I'm walking back inside, I realize their mother is on the front porch. I was honestly so stunned that she'd let her kids do that and I couldn't even just say anything. At that point, as said, enough is enough. We're reporting everything to the HOA. I called the HOA and reported the 9 violations in total. The HOA said that other people in the neighborhood complained several times about this house and stated that our next door neighbors always talked about how busy they were or how some last-minute emergency came up every time they were notified of a violation. I asked the HOA about timelines, and they walked me through the process of letters and warnings, final warnings and fines. It seemed like stuff should at least be improving within 6 to 8 weeks at the very latest. Fast forward about 2 months to the end of May. Nothing at all has changed, and the chickens are loud as ever. I called the HOA to get an update, and I learned that they had my complaints on file, but nothing had been done about them as the person who took my complaints had recently resigned. They say they will start working on these issues, and I reaffirmed the 6 to 8 week timeline to begin seeing improvements. I also sent them video clips of the chickens and all the noise that they make, several clips from several different days, along with photos of the status of the property. In the meantime, the neighbors park a recreational vehicle in their backyard as well, also not allowed per the HOA CC&Rs. Skip ahead to July. Minimal progress has been made. The truck had been moved to the front of their house and was illegally parked over the sidewalk. This is now 2 violations. You can't have a disabled vehicle viewable from any lot, and any vehicles must be parked in accordance with county laws. The only other change was that they brought a landscaper out to regrade their backyard because, as they stated to the HOA, the land developer had ruined the initial grading with their equipment, so therefore they couldn't begin landscaping their backyard. I can promise you, the developer never came close to this lot. Anyways, still no progress, and the chickens continue making noise endlessly. I contact the HOA again, and their COO assures me that they're working on these violations, and they stated that our neighbors moved into a neighborhood with an HOA and will need to follow the regulations. My initial thoughts were that we're finally going to get this whole mess cleaned up, and we'll be able to enjoy our back patio in some peace and quiet. Again, nothing happens, so I follow up in an email with new chicken videos, and I simply ask what date I could expect this issue to be resolved. The response I received was the complete opposite of what had been previously communicated and contradictory to what is in the HOA CC&Rs. I asked for clarification. They stated that they're in violation due to an unapproved structure, the noise the chickens make, and the waste they produce, but there isn't anything explicitly stating that chickens aren't allowed. Don't get me wrong, I am fine if our neighbors have chickens, but I don't want to have to deal with the byproduct of their chicken ownership. If they have a soundproof and HOA compliant structure that they keep the chickens in, that is completely fine with me. Another couple of weeks go by, into early August now, and I ask 2 questions. What date the neighbors have been given to reach compliance and what options they've been given. No response. So I wait a week and I send another email. No response. I wait another week and I follow up, and I finally get a response at 5 p.m. on a Friday that doesn't answer either of the questions. Just standard boilerplate, "Oh, we understand how frustrating this must be for you," and blah blah blah. So I follow up the next week and basically saying, "Hey, thanks for getting back to me, but I'm just hoping to get clarifications on my 2 questions. No response. I wait another week and follow up again. No response. I wait another week and I follow up again, and today and finally get a response from the CEO just now saying that my emails, once a week at the most, are bordering on harassment, that they have no updates on resolving the chicken issue, and that he is instructing his staff to ignore communications from me until they have an update. They won't tell me what progress they've made, what stage they're on, if they're dining our neighbors, and so on. Keep in mind, this is only related to the chickens, as they are far and away the biggest nuisance. No dialogue or discourse has occurred regarding any of the other violations since June. We are absolutely exacerbated and exhausted. What is my recourse here? Do I need to get an attorney involved? Am I being a Karen? Now, there isn't a board affiliated with this HOA, and it's just a property management company that runs several HOAs. The annual board meetings are the executives from the HOA company and the land developer. Do you agree with this comment and OP's response? Now that I think about it, if you throw up a fuss that causes new owners to not want to buy, the management company will be more motivated to do something. Oh yeah, that is an interesting idea, OP says. The real challenge in this is that we are the only people who are affected by them, so no other neighbors really understand what's going on. There are no houses behind us or on the opposite of them. And by and large, the average property value in the neighborhood is over $1.5 million, so people tend to take exceptional care of their property. Except these people. I really don't understand. How do you think OP could escalate this? Let me know what you think. Terrible HOA President Storytime by Root Investigator 6630. My HOA president does not like me. For a year, we were lied to about something that was not in the CC&Rs. They maintained the old documents that were no longer applicable on the HOA website to justify their ACC denials. A year after I was denied a particular improvement, I mentioned to the ACC that I would be submitting a request for some projects, including the one I was verbally denied of a year ago. I was told that as long as a previously denied improvement was XYZ per the covenants, I was approved. The HOA president started calling my contractor and harassing them about one of my projects, telling them I had not been approved even though I had written approval. I found out in the process of doing my other project, the one that was denied last year due to it conflicting with our covenants, that the previously denied project should have never been denied because it was not restricted in our covenants. Once I found that out, I told my contractor to alter it so that a portion of the project was no longer XYZ but XY. I've received a letter from their lawyer stating that I need to remove that portion of my improvement, which is not XYZ, because that's not what I got approved for. I don't feel I should remove it because I was lied to for a year about a restriction in our covenants that does not exist. Do I have an argument? I'm trying not to give any identifying information since some of my neighbors use Reddit, so I'll use this explanation. I submitted a request for a concrete driveway. I was asked what kind of concrete I would be using, and I told them regular concrete. I was then told that I couldn't use regular concrete for my driveway because the CC&R state that you can only do an exposed aggregate driveway. When I went to check the CC&Rs, it also confirmed what the ACC had said about exposed aggregate driveways being the only kind of driveway permitted. We went to speak with the board, but they denied our appeal, saying that we had to follow the CC&Rs. We even went as far to ask if the portion of the driveway that couldn't be seen from the street could be regular concrete because we really needed a driveway and couldn't afford a completely exposed aggregate driveway. We were still told no because we needed to follow the CC&Rs. In order to save up more money to afford it, we waited a year and mentioned our interest in the driveway again while we were requesting something else. When the ACC came to speak with us, the driveway was brought up and we were approved to proceed with it provided it was exposed aggregate like mentioned in the CC&Rs, and we agreed. After the construction of the driveway began, we found out that the CC&Rs that were mentioned were the wrong CC&Rs and that the only one that was actually in effect was an incomplete copy and did not show the filing signature and the date that would come up after the old one. I was furious. I'd been lied to and made to incur more money for something that was not in the current CC&Rs. I contacted my contractor and I told him that since we already had the materials, he should make the front portion of my driveway exposed aggregate and to make the back portion transition to regular concrete. I received a letter from the lawyer saying that I have gone against what I was approved for and need to remedy it to fit my approval. Otherwise, they will pursue litigation. Do I have an argument? Just for more insight, other things happened between I and the board that caused unnecessary friction and frustration leading up to the time the driveway was being constructed. Do you agree with this comment? They have to file the latest bylaws and CC&Rs with the state. In New Mexico, it's the AG. If you're in compliance with those, I would think you can tell them to play in a litter box. And this reply is, depends on the state. Mine doesn't require them to get filled anywhere. And OP says, they explicitly told me to refer back to the CC&Rs because that's what tells them what is allowed and isn't. But the CC&Rs state nothing about material. How I destroyed my HOA. I don't know what it is about these HOAs, but I hate them with a passion. When I was growing up, any neighbor who dared to get up in another neighbor's business was treated like crap for eternity. I can still remember pelting Mr. Jordan's car with snowballs with the other neighbor kids because he was being such a busybody jerk. We never got in trouble either because, well, our parents despised him too. These days, that jerk would not pass go and be anointed HOA president for life. Anyway, I've been plotting to destroy the HOA for quite some time, but began to lose hope that it was here forever. And like the French felt about the Axis who set up camp in their country, just would have to settle for some minor malicious undermining of the jerks. Until a week ago, a major court decision was reached in Berger vs. Wincliffe where the HOA was killed off after 30 years because the original documents failed to provide an extension provision. Of course, the HOA just amended the documents with this provision, but the court, which I suspect might be hating these things as much as I do these days, said, "Screw you, you can't do that." Wow. I went into my basement where I keep these ridiculous HOA papers, and I started reading. My documents were 32 years old and no extension provision either. But knowing the depths of denial these Karens and Kens are capable of, I looked up the lawyers who won that case and retained them. These guys are the top land use lawyers in the state, hired by the cities and towns to write the zoning laws, exclusively appointed by the governor to do the housing task forces. The real deal kind of lawyers you want for this crap. He wrote the legal memorandum and opinion letter, which I sent to every homeowner. A monumental victory for the value of my home and a very satisfying petty victory for me personally. Do you agree with this, to ask lawyers if you're entitled to repayment of any of the fees or the fines collected, especially after the HOA expired? I'd want money back, wouldn't you? That time, the company lawyers told me to contact law enforcement, posted my moral logjam. This took place years ago, but it still makes me laugh at the sheer stupidity of it all. It starts as all truly great sagas published on the internet begin, when I met a random guy through a friend at a bar in the city. Let's call the guy I met Mark for the purpose of this post. My friend had introduced me to Mark because for a few years leading up to that introduction, I shared an idea that I had for a business with anyone who would listen. I was told that Mark wanted to start his own business, had worked in the industry, knew a lot about the subject matter required, and thought that my idea was good. Mark and I met up for a lunch. We hit it off, and he said that he'd start the business as the CEO and agreed to me taking a part-time operational role. I agreed to help solely in a part-time operational role because I couldn't afford to quit my day job. I put in 15% of the cash for 5% ownership since Mark was going to put in founder hours, which is 80 plus hours a week, and agreed to put up 85% of the cash, which was more money than I could afford to risk on a new venture. So I worked part-time, I did what I said I would do, and I even tried to be of assistance on things that I had no experience with. I connected Mark with a fella that I'd done business with before, and we'll call him Paul. Paul and I got into a dispute ourselves. More on this later. Anyway, let's fast forward a few months, and I got into a dispute with Mark over stationery. Yes, stationery not being to his liking caused him to flip out. This was despite him picking the stationery out. Next up, the contract I got from Mark was not what we agreed. The legal work required a few months to get done, and I had expected delays, but when I finally got it, the paperwork didn't represent what I had agreed to own. Not only that, but my investment wasn't being acknowledged under the terms that we had committed to when I put the money in. Now, as I said, I wasn't able to risk much, and I only invested what I could afford to lose, so this wasn't a huge sum of money. I didn't want to make a big deal about it, since the amount was small, and he began promising a new contract when the business could pay for the lawyers to make changes. I signed nothing. Then it worsened. Mark and I start to fight anytime we're in a room together. As I think back, it's almost comical how angry he would get in my presence. I have other things to do with my time than squabble over stuff like stationery, so I worked on my areas of the business and I hoped that things would grow. I stopped in whenever I could and would help out regularly as needed with as little Mark interaction as possible. Paul would intervene sometimes when Mark would get particularly difficult to be around. Anyway, fast forward about 2 years, and Mark can't help but tell everyone who will listen that the business is going well. I have no idea how well things are going because Mark isn't giving me any updates. So I get a call around Christmas from Mark, and he wishes me a happy holiday and then drops the bomb on me that he wants to terminate my involvement and refund my investment. I decline the investment refund and say that I'm happy to no longer work with him. In my head, I think it's kind of hilarious that he thinks that this will just end that easily, but I say nothing to that accord to him. Mark and I hang up with him aggravated about my refusal to take the refund on my investment. Mark then sends me an email that I had resigned. This had no basis in fact, but certainly was creative about what we had just discussed. I correct him immediately in a reply, stating that he wanted to no longer work together, and that I can see that being the case, but want to discuss my investment. A few days later, Mark demands that I come and pick up a check for a reimbursement of my investment. I do not come and get it. Next thing you know, the company attorney huffs and puffs and tries to scare me with some strongly worded letter. This is the same idiot attorney who screwed up my contract to work on the business and my investment agreement. Let's call this attorney Mr. Cohn for the sake of the story. I send an email response to Mr. Cohn that he screwed up and the company seems to be doing well, that I hear rumors about how well, that I want to be on this for the foreseeable future, and I will not take a one-to-one cash out for what I put in. The attorney then emails me back, stating in writing that Mark never accepted my electronic transfer into the company account. Instead, Mark has another company he accepted the money into, a company I've never heard of, a company that is different than the name of the recipient on my electronic transfer, a company that will be committing wire fraud to accept the money that I sent. On that note, I did some sleuthing online. I found out that Mark had been forming one company every month or two. Then there were media reports and documents that he let slip in shared drives that he forgot that I had access to from when we agreed to work together. Mark was too cheap and stupid to pay for tech help, so he was using my shared folders that I'd created, and I certainly wasn't obligated to turn off the shares if he wanted to work out of them. Those documents showed me Mark had recently raised money in the company that I sent the payment to at 200 times the valuation that I had bought into it at, and Mark didn't disclose my investment to the new investors. Mark had, however, put me on documents showing my ownership to the previous investors. Not on documents I had ever seen before, but documents that he'd been sending around. When I share my suspicions that Mark is committing wire fraud with Mr. Cohn, I am told that I am the one breaking the law by knowing anything about the investment documents the company had used. Mr. Cohn tells me that by not picking up my check, I will not be entitled to any money and to contact law enforcement if I think something illegal has happened. He cautions, though, that I'll be the one in trouble. Cue the malicious compliance. I let the different respective members of the Securities and Exchange Commission along with law enforcement know what had happened to me. I provided them with all of the documents that I had from the matter. It took about 5 years for the investigation to conclude, for charges to be brought, for a trial to conclude, and for Mark to go to jail. They say government is slow, but they aren't kidding with just how slow. Maybe it was slow because Mark was running a large, tens of millions of dollars large fraud. Anyway, Mark will be serving time for about 30 felony charges they found uncovering the details of his Ponzi scheme. He will be away for a long time. I never did anything wrong. With the information that I was able to provide, Mr. Cohn ended up getting disbarred. There were other things Mr. Cohn did outside of what is shared in this post that I cannot share, or it could help to identify me to the folks involved. The investigators credited me with bringing the fraud to their attention. I lost my money in this ordeal, but gained an education, and I got to help bring down a crook. The sheer stupidity of Mark is that he didn't even follow the business plan that I had. He just used it as a story to convince investors to give him money. It is a business model that works very, very well. It took a few more years, but I'm now in a position to be pursuing this business full-time, with people of high integrity who all work together to ensure each other's success. We expect to have an extremely profitable year in 2023 after proving the business model worked in 2022. This comment just takes the cake here. Why don't you call law enforcement and see what happens? You don't say that when you're so full of crap. Terrible HOA story time. Wonder how you'd handle this. HOA tried to make me remove my rainwater cistern, posted by the home machinist. After buying my first house, one thing that I really wanted was a nice green lawn. I am also of the opinion that using fresh water for lawn irrigation is a waste of such a limited resource. So I set out to build an underground rainwater cistern to capture rainwater to irrigate my lawn. Operating on some assumptions that may or may not have been correct, I did not get approval before doing so. The theory being that an underground change that results in no visible change to the exterior of the property was beyond the scope of architectural controls. I also checked my local building regulations, and I found that there weren't any permits required for the installation of the cistern, only for associated pumps and underground plumbing later. So I built the cistern in a wooded area to the rear of the property that isn't visible from the street. When I am just about finished with it, I get a cease and desist letter from the HOA stating that they were doing a drive-through inspection and saw me building something large out of concrete and black pipe and didn't have approval for any projects on my property. The letter stated that I needed to submit an application for approval of the cistern. They used that word specifically, not sure how they even knew what it was when they couldn't see it, before I continued working on it. The management company representative displayed an utter lack of knowledge in just about every aspect of our dealings, including that it's highly unlikely that the town would allow a rainwater cistern in a residential yard. In fact, state law specifically prohibits any ordinance or regulation that would prohibit the installation and use of rainwater cisterns for flushing toilets and outdoor irrigation. They said a building permit is required for any project that includes concrete, as the town is very finicky about the use of concrete. This is also blatantly false. Not only did I have to get a town representative to state in writing that I did not need a building permit to install the cistern, but their website also states specifically that concrete patios, fences with posts set in concrete, and buildings less than 12 feet in any dimension, presumably with concrete foundations, do not require building permits. Approval is needed before any exterior changes are made to the property. There are plenty of written and unwritten rules allowing changes to be made without approval. Examples include like building raised flower beds, installing backup generators, or removing trees less than 6 inches in diameter. Annoyed, I just submitted an application thinking it was just someone trying to check a box. This was a mistake. They denied the application, stating that there were no architectural standards for rainwater cisterns, so they wouldn't approve it. So I appealed the decision to the board, and they set a hearing for the next board meeting. I then spent a few hours preparing for this appeal. So my argument includes things like, well, state law stating that it is the policy of the state that the use of rainwater cisterns for flushing toilets and outdoor irrigation is critical for meeting the future water supply needs of the state. State Supreme Court decision that states that real covenants may not offend articulated matters of public policy. And our covenants and restrictions make a distinction between on, under, and over lots, with architectural restrictions applying to structures placed on lots, not under lots. Simulations showing just tens of thousands of gallons of runoff that would be captured and not drained onto neighboring properties anymore. Now, the town website is actively encouraging the use of rainwater cisterns to improve water quality and decrease strain on the water supply. I mean, there's even photos of the site on the cistern showing that even standing right next to it and looking straight at it, you can't see it. None of this even mattered. The day of the hearing, the management company accidentally sends my confidential application with personal information I specifically opted out of sharing in the neighborhood directory to the entire neighborhood. After that happened, I asked a lawyer to send an email to the management company and the board on my behalf and to attend the hearing, as they appeared to be acting in bad faith. The association immediately canceled the hearing since their lawyer was not available to attend. After a few weeks, they set a new hearing date for a few months out. After waiting those few months, a few days before, they canceled a second hearing as well, suddenly interested in finding a mutual agreement. They say that I need to come to an agreement about screening the cistern and submit an application for the removal of trees. The cistern is underground. You can't see it. There is nothing to screen. They had pictures of the completed site. How they thought something had to be screened is beyond me. Well, I also specifically placed it in a spot that I would not have to remove any trees. So, not a single tree was removed. My attorney replied to their attorney within an hour of that response. It took them another 8 weeks to respond, stating that the association considers the matter resolved. They wouldn't approve it, but they were no longer attempting to make me remove it. The icing on the cake, they spent somewhere between $5,000 and $9,000 on their attorney for this and raised dues on the entire neighborhood, citing skyrocketing legal fees associated with a member's architectural review appeal. I told them that I was going to inspect the books and records of the association, as is my right according to the bylaws. The books, records, and papers of the association shall be subject to inspection by any member during all reasonable hours. They refused the inspection, stating that I had to schedule ahead of time with the management company, who was not available for at least a month, and pursuant to state law, the management company would babysit me and charge me $100 an hour during the inspection. State law does allow them to charge reasonable cost associated with preparing documents for the inspection. Does $100 an hour after documents are prepared for inspection sound like it's allowed by law? Do you agree with this commenter's theory? Strongly suspect that they canceled the first hearing because they told their lawyer about it, and at the last minute, and the lawyer, presumably knowing something about state law regarding underground cisterns, said, "You did what?" and needed time to see if there was any way to get them out of it. Then they canceled the second hearing because the lawyer told them that they were out of luck. This HOA is just doing shady stuff, trying to put it over OP, thinking that he won't even recognize, like he's a dummy or something. No way. How would you handle this? My HOA is stealing from me. Help. Posted by Weekly Salamander 389. Hello, I live in a condo that has 6 units. I bought my condo last year, and I've been here almost 10 months. The guy living in one of the units, we will call him Jay, is currently president of the HOA. He acquired this by default because the last president of the HOA moved out of our condo and he was the next longest owner. Every month, we pay $185 to Jay to cover our HOA fees. To my knowledge, these fees cover building insurance, water for the building, electric bill in common areas, other stuff like lawn maintenance, snow removal, and basically any other maintenance that's needed in the common areas. About 6 months in, one of my neighbors in the building stopped me to introduce himself. We'll call this neighbor O, and ask me what I thought about the building. The building obviously needs some TLC, which is why he asked me. So he told me that we should push the president, Jay, to make some fixes around here. At this point, we have an ugly front door, our hallways don't get cleaned, and rugs are starting to stain and smell. Water's leaking into the basement, mold's growing down there, and we don't have lawn or snow removal service, and well, nothing ever gets done. One day I see Jay and I make him aware of all these things. Jay tells me that our HOA fees are super cheap. I mean, it is cheap compared to others, and he's able to make it cheap by not paying others to do this stuff, and he does it all for us. He tells me he's going to jump on the mold ASAP. Meanwhile, O tells me that he's been asking for a receipt for paying his fees or some statements of where our HOA money goes because there never seems to be money for anything. But Jay always gives him the runaround. Fast forward a bit, Jay decides he's going to paint over the mold like it's going to solve our problem. It solved it for less than a week because the mold grew over that paint. Our storage lockers are in the basement and I decide to clean it out. I started to find some mold growing on my stuff, and I told Jay that painting doesn't get rid of mold, and him not taking care of things is starting to ruin my personal items. He told me things have always been like this, and I had to accept it pretty much. Now I'm asking him for a receipt and our HOA budget. He's refusing to provide me with any type of receipt or financial statements to show me why we don't have any money to fix things in our building. I told him that I am now suspicious of him because he won't provide this info, and he told me I should have bought somewhere else. So I started Googling the corporation where I write my HOA checks out to, and it turns out that corporation was dissolved in 2020, which is when the HOA presidency was passed on to Jay. I've only been here since 2022. By the way, Jay lives in a unit here with his mother. I'm 100% sure that she has a disability, probably dementia, but whatever it is, she doesn't have good memory. Anyway, I always hear this guy yelling at his mother and cursing at her very often. My dad was visiting me the other day and he heard Jay screaming, so he turned and he looked out his window and he swore that he saw Jay hitting someone, likely his mother. This guy is a problem. Help, what can I do? Where can I report him for the HOA? Do you think these commenters are pointing OP in the right direction with call the cops and get a lawyer and see a lawyer about this? If this guy's robbing the building or complex, you have the receipts. I would find out if you can withhold the money, put it in a different account. There's too many documents and possibly laws that would allow you to do something. Maybe talk to O and get the other tenants to go in together. What would you do? This story involves an HOA with a twist. Wonder what it'll be. I reported my annoying neighbor until he moved by I Nom Nom Awesome. I just want peace and quiet and to be left alone. I'm in my late 20s and I live alone, and I really hate kids. My neighborhood is a group of separate houses without yards that are spaced close to each other. I've lived here for 5 years by myself and it's perfect. Everything I've ever wanted. No yards to take care of and no kids around making noise. The houses share a large T-shaped cement driveway and none of us have ever interacted with each other. We come and go, we stay quiet, and we mind our own business. There's a small park down the street with grass for those who want it, literally a 30-second walk away. About a year ago, a guy with a lot of little kids moved into my neighborhood. As always, I just drove past him like anyone else and closed my garage, never spoke to him, no problem. Over time, he started making himself at home. He would park his large truck in the motor court, which has a sign saying that it's illegal because it's a fire lane, and it would block his neighbor's garage across from him. He would set up lawn chairs in front of his neighbor's garage and have the little kids out there running and screaming right in front of people's houses and garages, so we would have to listen to it, and then try not to run over the children as we back our cars out of the garages. He would rev his motorcycle at 8 a.m. on a Saturday and wake up the neighborhood. When his kids would be blocking the driveway, they'd take their sweet time moving. Because of this, I did one simple thing. When I would come home every day and drive past or around them, I wouldn't wave back when he waved at me. Oh, how that hurt his pride. He should have left it at that, but no, he had to press the issue. So, he started waving more and then shouting at me as I drove past and then telling his kids to stop and stand and wave at me as I always drove past, and I ignored them all. Until eventually, he didn't like how I drove around his kids that were in the way, even though I always drive at a safe and slow speed there, so he tried to confront me. He shouted at my car and then came to my garage as I was already getting out of the car and had the garage closing, so it closed right in his face without me ever looking at him. He didn't like that at all, so he immediately walked to my front door, saw that I had a doorbell camera, and turned around and walked away. A couple of days later, coming home, he was crossing the driveway as I arrived, and because he had told the kids to stop and wave at me, the jerk stopped in the middle, so he stood in my way to block my car while trying to get the kid to move, and so I honked for 3 seconds right in his face until he moved. That was our last interaction, and I decided that he's annoyed me enough. I live in an HOA. I don't actually care about any of the rules, but I decided to use them all to report him endlessly for every violation that I knew of, using my dash cam on my car for screenshots with evidence. His parking in the motor court stopped after they gave him a ticket. He had to throw out the child's playhouse that he had set up next to his garage, and I kept reporting him for having an open garage door that I don't actually care about in order to get him to have to stop hanging out in the motor court and, I don't know, use his brain and take the kids down the street to the park. It only took 4 months of reporting him repeatedly, and he just moved out. This commenter here has it down pat with the neighbors. I lived next to my neighbor for 8 years. I don't even know his name. We're cool though. We did a head nod about 6 months ago. Great guy. When you have good neighbors, it makes you so thankful that you don't have the bad ones. Oh my goodness. What do you think? HOA board member threatening to sue the HOA if she's voted out or removed. Posted by Sweet Snowy. I live in an HOA in Georgia, and we have 3 HOA board members. They were voted on last year, and they are the first elected members since our neighborhood finished development. Let's call them Scott, Jerry, and Karen. I just had a long conversation with Jerry this morning. Anyway, apparently a bunch of our neighbors talked to Scott and wanted to remove Karen from the board because she's very controlling, has called the cops on the neighbors countless times regarding minor parking issues, which she, herself, or her guests violate from time to time, and basically thinks she owns everyone. And she recently installed 7 cameras outside her house. Not sure if it's to monitor everyone or for her safety. Our area is super safe. But my impression is, it's for the former. Most want her off the board now. For the record, I personally don't have any beef with her, and I don't know all the issues our neighbors are complaining about, but I don't agree with how she's handled some situations. But then, when Scott filed a petition or something to remove Karen, nobody showed, I guess? But that leads me to what Jerry said Karen said about leaving the HOA board. She said that she's been keeping a list of all violations that she's seen since coming on the board, minor or major, and she will sue the HOA if she's voted out or removed from the board. I guess she heard about this petition or whatever it was, but can she blackmail us like this? Again, I never had personal beef with her, but I would and will vote for someone else next election time, and I'm reeling a bit about her threat. So again, this was all relayed to me. I didn't hear it from Karen herself, but is there anything we can do? Even without my vote, she'll definitely be voted out next time. I'm not on the HOA, and I do not want to be, nor do I have the time, but her threat is not sitting well with me. I do plan on thoroughly reading the HOA rules again as well, since I haven't read them since we bought the house. Curious if anyone's dealt with something like this before and what the outcome was. Do you agree with this commenter's answer? Since she's playing that card, the HOA should have its own attorney. It should also have liability insurance for its board members that will step in with defense attorneys when the board is sued. There are attorneys that specialize in representing community associations. Jerry and Scott should consult that attorney and get an opinion on whether a lawsuit would have any chance of success. My guess is that it won't, but I'm not a lawyer. Yeah, can Karen really be pulling this kind of crap? What do you think? Bought a no HOA home. Neighbors says there is one with updates, posted by Bunny Girl 420. We bought our house a couple of months ago, and in the description it said no HOA, and we never signed any HOA documents. The CC&R say there will be an HOA created, but there never was one created, and they were made in 2005. Yesterday, our neighbor, who we only met the day before, came to our door and said there is an HOA, since we do want the neighborhood to look nice, but we don't want to pay fees for it. Then we pointed out how some houses are completely unkept, and she went on to complain about those, but they still haven't fixed it, so that makes me think she's bullcrapping. I see other houses with Zillow descriptions with no HOA right next door also. This is Washington State. If I didn't sign any papers and it still shows on Zillow no HOA in the description, am I safe and this lady's just unhinged? Thanks for any feedback. I'm a first-time owner and I'd never buy a house in an HOA. Update. The title company confirmed the HOA was never established, and in our deed, the seller specifically stated it's no HOA. Neighbors who have lived here for 10 years say there's no HOA. Other neighbors who just moved here also had her come to their house, and they also say they signed nothing for an HOA. New neighbors requested paperwork for the HOA from her and received nothing. It seems that this lady is just trying to enforce the CC&Rs, which is fine by me since I already signed and reviewed them. Final update. The situation's resolved. She made a neighborhood association that helps during Christmas and July 4th stuff, and she calls this an HOA. She's also trying to tell people what to do, but there is no HOA. Yeah, legally, if there is not one, you don't have to go by the rules. Nice job, OP. Yes, our yard, your problem. So basically, we had the local Karen in our neighborhood with like 4 kids, and all call her entitled parent Karen. So Karen lives near us, like next to our house near us, and that can get annoying. Me, my dad, and my sister, mom's at work 24/7, dad's retired, we were at home just chilling out. Dad was sleeping, I was probably sleeping as well, and sister was downstairs playing on her tablet. Then the transformer on the telephone pole in our yard just explodes as loud as a cannon. Early in the morning, everyone is surprised and we were confused, and then we were like, oh no, no more power. Good thing we have an old generator that works like a champ, of course. Only needed an oil change and like 2 small parts needed to be fixed over the years. That's only when it failed us. So now the old generator starts up and keeps on running, but for how long? Oh, like for 3 days straight. So Karen gets extremely angry and calls the police on us. But why? Because our generator was too loud. Oh no, whatever shall we do? So the police come. My dad is confused, and he was thinking, we go to church, we're good people, what did we do? The police explained that Karen called because of the generator. Dad explains that, well, we can't really turn it off since we need power. The police understand fully and leave, and Karen is angry. She just kinda stink eyes our house for the rest of the day like she was planning something, which she didn't do anything. So a year later, my dad decides to dazzle up the house. New gray paint, carpets, siding, and windows. And now to deal with the ugly skinny trees in the backyard and replace them with beautiful flowers. So we order a company to cut down and grind the roots and remove them. And oh, can you guess just what happens? Child jumps into the fire pit? Our mini playground disappeared? Someone replaced the fence which we own? Nope. Karen calls the police yet again because we ordered a tree company to cut down some small, skinny trees. My dad, of course, couldn't do it. Me and my sister were not trusted with any power tools, and Mom was at work almost the whole day and the whole week, which is why we called them. So the police come again and are very annoyed because they remember last time that Karen called. They ask my dad what was the commotion, and Dad tells them that we ordered a company just to cut down some trees, which wouldn't take long. They're very small, and then the police left. Karen got angry, and later she moved out, thank goodness, and we don't have to deal with her anymore. Big win. She's just straight up telling the OP what to do on the property. I mean, if Karen told you that you couldn't cut a tree on your property or do anything like that, what would you do? Karen neighbor builds on my property and demands that I stay off. Click the video on your screen. You don't want to miss this one, and I'll see you there.